What's up, party people, and welcome to Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Each week we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated Classic servers. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and this is a show where it's not my opinion on World of Warcraft that counts, but yours. If you're new to the show, Countdown to Classic goes through your expert input on everything relating to the sure-to-be-amazing World of Warcraft Classic. Now, we have an absolutely jam-packed episode for you all today. We've got calls, we've got lore, we've got drama. You name it, and Countdown to Classic has got it. We'll start today with a few calls touching on everything from dueling to the relationship between heavy metal and World of Warcraft. Then we'll get through a big chunk of lore when we discuss everything about who and what we can expect to find in the hinterlands. And finally, I'll round the episode out with the debut of a new segment of the show, which is already sounding like it might become a fan favorite, Dramacraft. So, time is money, friend. You know the drill by now. If you like what you're hearing, join the Discord, follow the show on social media, and write into me if you'd like to contribute. Everything you'll need is in the show notes for every episode. Let's get straight into it with some brand new segment music I just bought this week and kick off with Calling Countdown. All right, we've got another caller on the line now, and we're speaking with Guzu. Guzu, how's things?
Pretty good, dude. I'm doing all right. How about you?
Excellent, excellent. Now, the reason that we pulled you on the show today is because you were involved in a bit of a dueling tournament during the Classic demo, and you were lucky enough to be able to take the win on that one. How did you have fun during all of it?
Yeah, it was great fun. We spend a lot of time, or I spend a lot of time grouping up with a bunch of different people and I guess gearing up and just talking to people in general. And it was a great experience, I think. It was a lot of fun.
It definitely looked like it got a lot of people involved, and people enjoying being back in Classic for sure during the demo, and also seeing a bit of old school dueling going on. Although how old school it was could be up for debate given some of the things that we saw with the regen and the things that they need to iron out once they get us closer to release with the Legion client problems and things like that. But we'll talk a little bit about what you went through the tournament, and I was just interested to get your thoughts on, you decided to roll a paladin, and was that something that you had looked into prior to going into the tournament? Had you played around with all the classes and decided that whatever was going on in the demo, that Paladin was probably going to be number one for you? Or how did you come to that decision?
Actually, it's a funny story because I was fiddling around. I was attending the first tournament hosted by Tips Out on the Horde side a few days prior to that. And I was playing a Hunter. So I was thinking about for quite some time which class could be the best one to win, because I'd like, whenever I enter something like a tournament or something like that, of course I'm in it for the fun, but I always want to participate and like be as good as I can. So I started up thinking about which classes would be the best. And I knew in the demo, because of the region it's a little bit messed up, the region. The numbers are a little bit off, and the region seems to be a lot higher than it usually is. So you wanted to play something with a lot more sustainability, because it's more so a long fight than a fast burst as people might be used to now. I initially rolled a Hunter because of the kiting, and the pet. Then I dueled a Paladin a day into the demo, I think. And I realized the region was, very, very absurd, very, very high. And I made my decision to roll a Paladin afterwards because of the wisdom buff and the region basically. And yeah, that's what I did.
It was something that was obviously very noticeable, and a lot of people were talking about it while the duels were going on, that some of them were taking a very long time, these matches. It was like a war of attrition, really. And particularly the matchup that you had in the final when you had something like Priest versus Paladin. I mean, people yeah, people were dueling left, right and center, whether they were in the tournament or not, all through this demo. But definitely these longer duels could come about, as you say, if you played a class with a little bit of sustainability. So talk us through what it was like being involved in those really long matchups. And was it frustrating? Like, what was going through your head during that first round of the final when it took quite a while?
So I've done quite a few duels prior to the tournament against priests as well. Actually, some of the priests that I was fighting as well in the duels, in the tournament. And both sides basically knew that it was going to be like a war of attrition, as I said, and just like a drawn out fight. And I mean, the reason why the fights were so drawn out is because at level 19, especially as a paladin, as a priest, you don't really have any like burst potential or any like setup for kills. So the way we would try to set up kills is we were allowed 1 dream dust per duel, which is an item picked up from the dust devils with a 5% drop rate in Westfall. And it basically puts the target to sleep, by up to 30 seconds. So what we would try to do is get the opponent low, use the dream dust to set up either a hand of justice or a fear. So you would get the target low or get the opponent low, use a dream dust and try to set it up with a CC chain afterwards to kill him, because I only relied on my judgments and my auto attacks and my hand of justice. That was really my only like abilities to kill. So it's basically a drawn out. You're basically waiting for somebody to make a mistake, whereas you're allowed to like. So if you got below, for instance, like 30% health, I would be very, very in danger, because if I got a fear and I'm below 30% health, I have no Bob or divine protection or anything. It would be a setup for a kill for him. So it's about waiting for a person to make a mistake. Hence is why we got those 20-minute duels that we saw, I guess.
Now, one of the people that you took out during your way to the final, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw that you took out Serenity. Is that right?
Yeah, that was an interesting duel. Yes. That was in the semifinals. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's the semifinals.
It was either the semifinals or the one before. But what were you thinking coming up against, someone as vaunted as Serenity, someone who's relatively well known within the PvP community?
I knew Serenity. So Serenity now is the person who won the first tournament hosted by Tips Out. He was playing a Tauren Shaman, I believe. And he basically won every single duel all the way to the tournament. And I knew he was a very, very good player. I actually hadn't dueled him before. I dueled a lot of other priests, but not him. And the first duel, lasted 25 minutes, if I remember correctly. And I won the duel because we ended up, I guess, talking a bit to each other in /say and like, just like having a little bit of fun, basically. And he I think he kind of forgot a little bit about his health, and which allowed me to set up my kill, as I said, with the Dream Dust and the Hodge. So I popped up, I Divine Protectioned off his fear, and I allowed me to Hand of Justice and kill him. So I won the first duel like that. And then the second duel lasted for, I think, 30 minutes again. And we decided to do a roll for the win, actually, because neither of us used potions, because of the region. I had around 100 potions ready to be used, and he had the same. But we actually didn't use any potions in the duels, not really, at least in the second duels, because we figured out how to sustain our mana and our health in a way so we didn't really need to use any potions. So it ended up in kind of a stalemate in a sense.
Well, that was the next question I wanted to ask, actually, in terms of consumables. You mentioned you had around 100 potions. What was that grind like, just farming potions? Where were you going, and was it mind-numbingly boring?
Honestly, I had a lot of fun doing it. Westfall is a little bit stale, a little bit barren comparison to Barrens, I guess. But it was actually a lot of fun because I got to talk to a lot of people. I grouped up with a bunch of people, including like Savix, the Paladin, if you know who he is, and a lot of other friends, I guess, a guy called In Service Games, who I also played with a lot. And it was just fun. We were just basically hanging out and just killing mobs. We ran into dead mines. So what we would do is either you would go to dead mines and kill the elites, especially the undeads before the instance. There's a four-man Tisselnettle, I think he's called, and a few other undead miners. There's also some gnolls in the southeastern part of Westfall that we would kill for the overseers, or we would go kill the Murlocs. And we would basically just make like a group of 5 to 10 people and just run around and AoE things down and just kill stuff and got the drops. And I had a bunch of stuff. I had every single scroll, like the stamina, protection, spirit, agility, strength. I have swiftness potions. I had rejuvenation potions, which restores mana and health. Healing potions, less healing potions, mana potions. I had the Gortusk liver pies from the quest in Westfall. I would do them on several characters. So I had 9 of those. I would have several hunters parked around Westfall to farm dust devils. Locking on them each time and kill the dust devils basically. And I would have, some grinding stones for mining, basically every consumable I could think of. So it took quite a while, but it was great fun, honestly.
Yeah, well, I mean, you put the time in, obviously, and it paid off in the end. And well, speaking of paying off, how much money did you net in the end?
So, me and the second place as well, we ended up splitting the first place winnings instead of it going 65 to 25, I think, of the total.
Okay.
We ended up splitting them, so it was $540 each.
Nice. That's a nice little bit of pocket change.
Yeah. It was me and Kenny, a guy, a priest, a female dwarf priest as well. He was the second place. So we ended up splitting the first place winnings.
Well, there's your first 3 years worth of subscription to Classic paid for.
Yeah, there it is, I guess.
Now, I mean, obviously we've been talking about dueling within the demo and the confines of the way the demo worked. And as we keep talking about, the regen was all messed up, and we know it's going to be different because they told us they're going to be trying to work on it when Classic comes out. But knowing that things might be more vanilla-like when Classic comes, I should ask, is your focus PvP, or are you a raider who happens to PvP on the side?
So, in Classic in particular, of how I see it at least, you have to, if you take the game seriously, quote unquote, and you wanna do like high end content in a sense, you have to do both. And for me personally, I enjoy both aspects of the game. But my preferred part of the game is definitely the world PvP. I'm not so much, into BGs, battlegrounds and stuff like that. I really, really enjoy, the reason why I really, really enjoy Classic or vanilla to the extent that I do is because of the open, like the vivid world, like all the people running around, and you can like find people and PvP against people in the open world, and you will remember names, and you know who people are, and it's kind of fun. That's why I really, really enjoy it. But both aspects of the game is for sure something I do enjoy.
Okay. Yeah. Well, knowing that you're gunning for that more sort of PvP side of things, and knowing, like I said, that we're going to be going back to what we can only presume will be vanilla-like gameplay and stats and all of that jazz. Are you thinking of rolling a paladin again, or do you think, I mean, obviously you won't have that same kind of, sustainability. It will be a little bit different, but are you thinking of, sticking with what you know now? You're like, hey, I won a tournament with paladin. Maybe I'll do it all again. Or do you know that that's all a fallacy? It's not real. I've got to stick to another class that I know better.
Actually, funnily enough, it is, in the tournament, it's actually my first time playing a paladin in Classic. So I played a lot of Classic. I played on a bunch of different private servers as well in the past. I'm more so known as, I wouldn't say known, but what I usually play is actually a rogue. I play rogue for the most part and warrior. That's like my two classes. I enjoy melee a lot, or melee. Yeah, but it was definitely a lot of fun playing a paladin. I do not plan on rolling one in Classic. Definitely a rogue is what I do enjoy, which kind of intertwines in a little bit with the world PvP aspect that I enjoy, I guess, because rogues are very, very good at picking fights in world PvP, and that's why I really, really enjoy them as well, I suppose.
Well, picking fights or just starting fights.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
yeah, basically.
Yeah, yeah. If I can ask you one question now that you brought up, World PvP and saying that you're more of a fan of that than Battlegrounds. We talked on the show recently about Blizzard's decision to obviously open the game without Battlegrounds being there from the start. And they showed us that 4-stage plan that they've got mapped out for us once Classic does eventually release. And people were rejoicing, saying that's fantastic. We want world PvP to be quite prevalent in the opening few months of the game. Now, my question for you is, would you reflect that sentiment? But then also, I had another listener say, you know what? I don't think it would be that bad, even though a lot of people tend to disagree with this. They were saying, I don't think it would be that bad to give us a few weeks, maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever, of the honor system without Battlegrounds. What would you think of something like that?
I mean, honestly, I think the way they're doing it without the honor system being implemented in the beginning is probably the best thing they could do, honestly, because it kind of makes it so that a lot of people that are trying to rank can more so, like, I guess, enjoy the leveling experience more so than focusing on the honor as they're doing it. Because what a lot of people will probably do if the honor system was implemented is more so farm honor the most efficient way they can in regards to instead of leveling and enjoying the experience, I guess. I mean, because the ranking will come eventually, and it will come, but I think it's more so important to also take in the game and take in the quests and just have a good time. And you can still PvP and you can still do the world PvP while you're leveling and stuff like that. It's just like in a different way, right? Because it'll all come eventually, and it's important to take in the leveling and like the feel of the game and like the aspect and doing a dungeon and doing other stuff as well. And yeah, the grinding for the ranks, if you are interested in doing that, will come eventually for sure.
Well, knowing that Battlegrounds are coming later on, are you going to be the type of person who's going to rush to 60 as quickly as possible and then rejoice in a lot of world PvP?
Yeah, I am going to be leveling as fast as I can on my first character, at least, because I enjoy the thrill of being one of the, I guess, top players on my servers, and I enjoy the thrill of being like a part of some of the first people to reach a certain content, and I do try my best to do that, and I have a lot of fun doing that stuff, because it's always when I play games, it's either I go full, like I go really, really hard, and I try my best to be very, very good and climb ladders and whatnot. Or I do it very casually. And when it comes to Classic, it's very, very difficult for me to go, I guess, mediocre or like just kind of like cruise through it, because I always end up getting sucked in and playing way too much, I guess. But this is what Classic does to you, I guess. But that's really what I really, really enjoy about the game, that it's like when a game is so good that it can suck you in as Classic can. It's something that really, really is enjoyable about it, and that's what I really, really like about it, because you can really, really lose yourself and lose your time in the game, whatever you may do in it.
Now, one last question before I let you go, Guzu. The final that you were involved in was ultimately decided on rolls, because obviously things were taking very long. Talk us through what was going through your head when that absolute zaniness was happening with all those rolls.
Oh, yeah, that was interesting. I was, it was 9 a.m. in the morning for me. I'd been awake for, I think probably around like 25, 26 hours at this point. And I actually fell asleep for half an hour to an hour between one of the duels, when it wasn't my turn. And it was quite, I was kind of looking forward to it, just having like a definitive decision of what's going to happen, because I was very tired. And honestly, I just joined the tournament just to have fun and just like to be a part of like this event with the Classic community. And I was not so much thinking about like the win, as more so I was thinking about just getting it all over, in a sense, because I was very, very tired at the time, but it was very fun at the in the death roll. We sat on Discord with the people rolling it, and there was a lot of other people in the Discord call as well, hyping it up, and it was very, very fun being a part of it. And I honestly enjoyed it a lot, even though it was a role in the end, which kind of had to be done in a sense, because if we were to duel, it would probably end up in a very, very much longer tournament than it would have been, I guess, because of the region and the feel of the duels, I guess, again, especially against the paladins and the priests. So it was just a lot of fun.
It would have turned into a fucking cricket game.
Yeah, basically, because like when it's also when it's like, I guess, of course, there's some money on the line and all that jazz, but it's more so about of like the honor, I guess. You don't want to be the guy losing after a 30-minute duel, right? So people won't just give up the duel in a sense. So it's more about the honor than anything else, I guess.
Fair enough. Well, Guzu, congratulations on winning Stay Safe's dueling tournament. I wish you good fortune in the wars to come, and thanks so much for calling in.
Thank you so much, and you too.
All right, we've got another Countdown to Classic listener on the line, and another podcast host, which I'm so happy to have on the show for the first time. So please, everyone, say hello. We've got Jason from the Starting Zone, aka Shield Wall. Thanks so much for coming on the show, mate. I appreciate it.
Josh, what's up, man? I'm so glad that you asked me to do this. It's so exciting to be here with you. We talked at BlizzCon about maybe collaborating on some audio, and I didn't think we'd be doing it this week, but I'm glad we are.
Mate, I like to strike while the iron is hot. So absolutely, it was a great meeting you. I told a few people on a previous episode, we bonded over a couple of drinks. We got to talking, as I talked to a number of people that night, and I really got along with you. So I'm so happy that you agreed to come on the show. And with us today, we also have Countdown to Classic, regular guest, Defcamp. Hello, Defcamp. How are you?
What's up, Josh? I am doing great. I'm having a fantastic day. Thank you very much. Josh, thanks for having me on. I heard we're going to talk about some metal. I'm really excited, man.
That's right. And you're here for a very specific reason, because just to give people a little bit of a background, I started to talk to Jason on the last night of BlizzCon, and he started telling me these great stories about how much of a metalhead he was and how he's enjoyed, bonding even with some of the Blizzard employees over this common love of metal. And I started talking to him about what is it about metal that really attracts World of Warcraft players? What is that correlation between people who gravitate towards games like WoW and also, heavy metal music and other kind of, loves or hobbies that sort of all tie in together, and we swim in the same waters. And he started talking to me about it, and I really appreciated it. And I said to him, look, we've got to get you on the show to discuss this. And then I thought straight away of Defcamp, because I know you're a huge metal fan as well. And I thought it'd be a good opportunity to really dive a bit deeper into what it is about this game that attracts metalheads, or what it is about metal music that attracts WoW players, and so on and so forth. So I'll start with you, Jason. Let's get a bit of background on you. If you could just tell the listeners, so, they get maybe a little bit of your metal resume, and they don't go, oh, this guy's a fraud. He knows nothing about metal. Talk to me about how you fell in love with metal music and what your greatest bands are and what your loves are and what you're listening to at the moment and so forth.
Oh man, Josh, we could do 3 hours on this. I think, I have a couple great loves in terms of, entertainment media in my life. Blizzard games being a big one. When I was a little kid, the first one ever was probably like Nintendo. And then right after that was heavy metal, man. I remember seeing like a Metallica video on TV when I was 11. And I was like, dude, these guys all have long hair and beards. They're wearing all black. They have these pointy guitars. Their music is really loud and fast. Like, this isn't like anything else I've ever experienced before. And that led me down an entire path, an entire lifestyle that continues to this day, but really shaped me as a younger man. Maybe want to play guitar, maybe want to experience this whole scene. I would like buy an album from a band that I knew and then look at the thank yous in the back and see all the other bands they thanked, bands they toured with or their label mates or whatever. Then I'd check out their records, and the cycle would just kind of continue. We didn't have the internet back then, so that's how you found out about stuff like this. Or, we had like magazines. You'd pick up like Metal Hammer or something and see what bands had new records out. And so, when I was kind of like the way I'm a nerd about WoW these days, I was kind of a metal nerd when I was like a teenager, And, I learned how to play. So I played guitar when I was younger, and I would try to learn how to play the songs, and I started bands and played original music. And, I actually got to do a couple shows opening for some of my heroes. I played a show one time, direct support for Anthrax with their classic lineup.
Wow.
It was their first show with Joey in like 13 years, and we got to be direct support for that show. That was a trip. And then one of my other, good.
Oh, he's cheering you on. Defcamp's cheering you on, saying hell yeah.
Oh,
yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah. And then, I also got to share a stage with like essentially the classic lineup of Testament. We were direct support for them one time too. So, that's how I spent my younger days, was just, and I got into all metal. Metal is it's a very broad genre, right? There's a ton of subgenres. If you look around, you can find these things that are like roadmaps of how all the subgenres interconnect and everything. And so I like stuff kind of all over the spectrum, but it's always been a part of my life and something I've been passionate about since I was a little kid, really.
Well, if I could quickly hit you up and just say, could you name your top 3 metal bands of all time?
Oh man, Josh, I don't think you can do that to me, man.
I won't make you itemize it then. Just rattle off a couple that you really like.
All right, how about if I hit you with the 3 bands that I've been listening to the most lately?
Sure.
Because that's how I tend to go, is I just rotate stuff in, I binge it heavily, like nonstop, entire discography on repeat, and then after a couple of months I cycle some new stuff in.
Sure.
So lately it's been Ailstorm and Gloryhammer and this band called Gamma Bomb. Those are the 3 bands I've been listening to the most this year.
All right. Now, Defcamp, I'll turn to you. Having heard Jason's resume, let's get a bit of yours. Now, Jason, I must admit, I had no idea. Like, I think I knew that you played music as well, but I had no idea to that extent that you were opening for the big bands and stuff like that. That's crazy. Now, Defcamp, that's a hell of a story to follow, but without much pressure, I know you're a musician as well, Defcamp. You don't only listen to it, you play it as well. Talk to people about your metal background.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't open for any amazing bands, but I do have some interesting stories. So, growing up, my uncle was a musician, and I grew up listening to a lot of old school metal, Black Sabbath, Dio, stuff like that. And my brother, of course, he's a big metalhead, introduced me to Metallica, things like that. Mm-hmm. And by the age of about 13, I started playing myself. Got in a band, started going to Ozfest, things like that. Started meeting some of my idols, Phil Anselmo. And, ever since a young age, I've kind of been drawn to metal. I've listened to all music, classic rock, but metal has always been at my core kind of like, it's what speaks to me the most, right? So yeah, in my teens, I got really, really heavy into the metal scene, started playing a lot. Unfortunately never got too big, but, for me, I think metal is kind of like, it's kind of like that, how WoW is like that one thing that is, sacred to you. Metal's the other thing. So it's like WoW and metal. And it's just those kind of, I would say WoW, metal, and, probably some other things, but those are like my 2 core things that I go to. But yeah, personally, I like the classic kind of metal, Black Sabbath, Dio. I used to go to Ozfest a lot. I'll tell you a funny story. I met Phil Anselmo there. The lead singer from Pantera. And, I was about 15 at the time. We're going up to meet him, get signatures. And I actually tripped over the tent and, ripped my pants in half right in front of him. Yep. And I get up and, my pants ripped in half and Phil Anselmo stands up there staring at me, just like with a shocked look on his head, on his face. And my buddy goes, "He's wasted." And the whole crowd just starts cheering. So yeah,
it's a hell of a first impression.
Yeah,
that was the first time I met Phil. So, but yeah, playing music, I've started playing guitar, the drums. Like I said, my uncle was, who, had passed away, was really, really influential, on me and, played music and taught me how to play guitar, and I picked up drums myself. But, everywhere I go, it's kind of like, I always have a metal playlist on my car or wherever I'm going. So it's definitely one of those things where it's like the culture and everything about it. I just love it.
All right. Well, you've convinced everyone that both of you know your metal, you love your metal, and now I hate to one-up your celebrity encounter, both of you. We heard that Jason opened for Anthrax and Defcamp. You just told the story about meeting or bumping into the lead singer from Pantera once, and I'm going to one-up both of you and say, well, I met the lead singer of Train at BlizzCon, so beat that.
There you go, man. The dream.
Exactly,
Yeah,
living the
awesome.
dream. Well, look, now that we've heard a bit more about your backgrounds, what I'd love to get into is just to dive into the sort of, and it's open to interpretation from both of you. But as I said, I want to know, what is it about metal that really speaks to WoW players and vice versa? I'm sure both of you are quite aware that you're far from alone. It seems like I bump into, or you read on the forums a lot of WoW players do really like metal music. Now, I'm not a huge metalhead myself, but I appreciate a song or two here and there. But I'm in the minority, I feel. I feel like a lot of people are the kinds of people that grew up, whether they grew up playing D&D or what have you, and some of these sort of what we call the nerdier hobbies still somewhat fall in line with metal music. And Jason, why do you think that is?
Oh man, I think there's a deep connection there for a lot of people. I think that the development of what we know as metal music is really intertwined with fantasy and the occult and stuff like that. Even going back to like early Led Zeppelin stuff, they had lyrical references to Tolkien in their stuff. And then obviously Sabbath, when they started, they were really pushing boundaries, and they were trying to be edgy, right? And they were trying to do things that would make people nervous. And so things like the occult and these folklore things start coming in lyrically. And these are some of the bands that define the sound and the aesthetic. So you sort of have all of this common DNA running through this type of music and these types of stories, which then, turn into different types of ways that we play or enjoy, fantasy, whether it's, novels or games. Obviously a game like D&D was heavily influenced by this stuff, which then feeds into WoW, and then metalheads grow up playing these games and reading these books, and then they start bands and they incorporate it into their lyrics and imagery. So it's really just this big feedback loop, I think. It's certainly in terms of like WoW specifically, the art style and the aesthetic of WoW was really primarily developed by Samwise Didier, who is a very prolific metalhead. And also, he's obviously a very prolific artist. And when he was a kid, he was really into Kiss. And Kiss isn't really a metal band, right? But they have that aesthetic. They have the costumes, the theatricality. Their album covers are these, epic kind of fantasy styled paintings. And, that kind of stuff fed into his sensibilities as an artist. And I think you can kind of see how those things exist in parallel over the years.
Now, you actually told me as well at BlizzCon, you got the chance to meet and hang out with Samwise, or as you lovingly refer to him, Sammy. Is that right?
Yeah, Sammy's somebody I've gotten to know over the years. We've had the pleasure of having him on the show. We did a spotlight interview with him about his life and his career, which was one of my ultimate privileges working on Starting Zone. And the way I kind of sort of got to know him is because he was on Twitter and he would post YouTube videos of metal bands that I liked, and it was stuff that wasn't necessarily super popular or relevant anymore, but he would also post new stuff too. So he was obviously still plugged into the culture. So I would send him messages and just say, hey man, I love that song. That was a great one, whatever. And I ran into him at BlizzCon back in 15, and he kind of knew who I was from Twitter, and we just struck up a conversation. And then I saw him the next year, and he remembered me from, the previous show, and we sort of, I floated the idea, like, why don't you come on the show? We'll talk about whatever you want. Talk about your career, talk about your work, talk about metal. And he was like, let's do it, man. So we had him on, and we just kind of stayed in touch, here and there ever since. And, he's just a guy that's real passionate about everything that he creates. And, I mean, obviously he's worked on bits and pieces of almost every game Blizzard has shipped since the Lost Vikings. And so you can see what he puts into the way the games are visually developed. But a lot of what feeds into his process is the music that he listens to.
Fair enough. Now, Defcamp, if I could get you to sort of piggyback off of a couple of points that Jason has raised there, I'd actually ask you if you were aware of Sam's influence that Jason has just described. But then flowing on from that, Jason raised a couple of good points that as soon as he said it made a lot of sense to me, and I'm sort of upset at myself for not realizing this earlier when he started talking about the Led Zeppelin lyrics that we get and the references to Middle Earth. I mean, I'm a big Zeppelin fan. As soon as he said that, I was like, oh fuck, of course. Like, that's maybe where the correlation is. Like, with these things in one way or another do wind up intertwining, and we see crossroads sometimes between music and games or pieces of fiction, just in terms of pure shout outs or references. So flowing on from that, is that something that you've picked up on over the your time consuming metal, or what else do you think adds to the love affair with metal and WoW and how they interact with each other or have a symbiotic relationship?
Yeah, the fantasy part is definitely a big part of it. Like you said, Zeppelin, I mean, I was a huge fan of Lord of the Rings and Zeppelin, and that fantasy kind of, I think, got to the core of what metal was. But I think another big part of it is the outsider mentality, the fringe, because, nerd culture was very, it wasn't accepted, until recently kind of, and it was not mainstream. And a lot of people were drawn to, metal was never really mainstream. I mean, you had bands like Metallica who really didn't, become mainstream until, their fourth album, which, until the Black Album really. And, it had 80s hair bands, stuff like that, but that's not what real metal was. You ask any metal fan, you're going to be talking about Megadeth and not really Kiss. You know what I mean? So, and I feel like a lot of people who were drawn to that, outsider fringe type, because, guys growing up playing D&D, a lot of these guys who are now the devs at Blizzard, they grew up, being made fun of and, being kind of picked on, and metal also gave that release and gave that kind of, emotional kind of release that you needed when dealing with a lot of shit like that growing up. You're getting picked on and you're listening to metal, and it's kind of, for me at least, I know it's an escape in its own, listening to metal and being able to go into this fantasy world, if you will. And, no other genre of music really spoke to me the way that metal did, especially for me growing up as a nerd. And now you see these guys who grew up with playing D&D, listening to metal, and they incorporate, I believe, what we see in WoW today is, we see things, that they grew up with that they put in the games today. So it's kind of like this cycle that has gone on over the years. I'd say probably, 70s, 80s, 90s, a lot of these guys who grew up, with metal and with, in the nerd culture, they're kind of incorporated into the games that they, designed. And I feel like, we're kind of going away from that recently, but I do feel like it's very strong in the gaming culture still today.
That's a great point regarding that somewhat of an outsider mentality, and something that, again, as soon as you said it, I sort of nodded my head and was sitting here thinking, of course, there must be that mentality behind it all as well. So, Jason, would you agree with what Defcamp has said in terms of when you were growing up with metal music and being introduced to it, and obviously also being a young lad and perhaps picking up the hobbies that you were picking up, were you coming at it from that mentality? Did you enjoy, not necessarily maybe looking at it as an outsider, but being somewhat of a piece of a niche community? Did you get that feeling?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I definitely bonded with people over music, and I think anybody who is really interested in a very specific subgenre of some kind of entertainment or some kind of niche probably finds those bonds. And the bond among people who are really into metal is similar to the way that people bond over Blizzard games, for example, like WoW. I think there's a parallel there as well. I think, one of the big things that I was thinking about when Defcamp was talking about it was the thing about metal is that it's so expansive. It's so broad. You can do metal that sounds like anything and make it be about anything. You couldn't do top 40 hard rock or pop music and write songs about elves and dragons, you'd never be on the radio. You'd be a comedy act, right? You'd be Weird Al or something.
Yeah.
But a metal band can do that and be taken seriously within that genre. Or they could do one song that's about that and another song that's about, geopolitics or something or ecology or whatever, and it'll be accepted by the audience. The audience is willing to accept whatever ideas you want to put forth, and I think there's stuff you can get away with in metal that you can in other genres of music. So it lends itself to doing, sword and sorcery lyrics if you want to, because there's going to be an audience for that. Whereas in other corners of the music world, it would be really incongruous. It would be super weird. But in metal, I think because of how it developed, from those 60s hard rock bands, and then, the next generation of guys came in and kept pushing the limits, pushing the aesthetic, that it sort of just opened up the core metal audience, the niche metal audience, that metal can be anything that you want it to be. You just have to do it well, and people will respond to it.
You're definitely speaking out to me when you say things like, obviously you have those freedoms within metal to sort of put anything you want in your lyrics. Because I presume you can categorize this as metal. Obviously, Ozzy Osbourne, one of my favorite old songs is like Fairies Wear Boots. And, it's a song about a guy tripping balls and literally like hallucinating and interacting with the fairy that's, he's imagining in front of him, which I love.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not out of place in there. And then you could do a song about, and then another Sabbath song, like Children of the Grave or something, is about the, socio-political impacts of war itself, which is the complete opposite of a song about a guy just tripping. So, I think from the earliest days, it was established that the genre is just malleable. It could be about anything that you want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the great thing about metal too is it's very outside the box. And I think it kind of draws people that are, different kinds of thinkers, right? People who kind of like to try to think for themselves. And I mean, this is my experience, right? So I always felt kind of drawn to metal in that way, because it wasn't, everyday love song, that kind of thing. That people kind of, I felt like, and I know this sounds kind of cringy, but, like a angst kind of teen. And I wanted to, explore all these different things that metal had to offer. And they say it's a great point, because, metal could be about dragons, it can be about fairies, it could be about love, it can be about pretty much anything. But I think the passion that a lot of musicians have, and the way they drive it into their music is kind of what draws a lot of people, because there really is so much freedom in the genre. I mean, you talk about bands like today, like Opeth, and just kind of the way that they, just really passionate guys who are just really smart. And when you look at the music itself, I think a lot of it's very, unfortunately misunderstood. People hear, oh, this guy's screaming and he's doing this and he sounds like an idiot. But, I think metal is kind of some of the most beautiful music I've ever heard has been metal. So I think it's very misunderstood in a way too.
Well, I'll keep it going with you just for a second, Defcamp. And you mentioned two words that sort of stand out as keywords to me. And you talk about passion, you talk about freedom. And Jason raised that concept of, freedom of expression in metal music that we've just touched on. They're not bound by the, unseen walls or barriers of top 40 music, where you can just sing about whatever the fuck you want. And you are, able to get away with that within that genre. And then you talked about passion and, the sort of, the love for the game, if you will, and the love for that freedom of expression. And one thing I would correlate that to is, having just come back from BlizzCon, one little observation that I made is the sheer amount of people that are, and please don't think that I'm saying this in a negative way. I'll explain this the right way. The amount of people that I saw with, like Jason said, the long hair, heaps of tattoos and all that jazz. And I'm saying that because I am the opposite. I am, quite frankly, a bit of an outlier within the community, I think, in that I'm a white collar guy. I put on my suit and tie every day before I go to work. I argue in court all day, and then I come home, rip it off, and play video games. I don't have any tattoos. I don't have long hair. Like, I am white bread. I'm as white bread as it gets. But the amount of fans that I saw that I loved seeing how passionate they were about Blizzard products. They've got the Blizzard tats everywhere. They've got the music tats everywhere, and just not being afraid to show that love of something and having the freedom to express it. Again, I think is something that not only video game fans, but Blizzard fans, they are of a certain, cut from a certain cloth that I thought was fantastic, that they can just lead the lives that they want to live and not be, you know, someone who's boring and stuffy like me and be like, oh, I can't get a tattoo. I can't get away with that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of it, Josh, is like you said, I think is the freedom of expression, you know, that so many people, I could speak for myself, right? And I know a reason why metal and games spoke out to me so much is for so long in my life, I felt misunderstood. And I felt like, portraying, this lifestyle, and it was a way for me to express myself in a way that I thought, fit me, you know, because I didn't feel like I fit into the mainstream, to the, you know, the pop culture, and all that, you know, like sports, you know, I love sports. I love football, but it's, you know, I'm not the guy who's going to name off every, you know, player, this kind of thing, that and the other. You know, my passion is music and gaming, really. And to be able to express that in a way where you don't feel like it's, everyone else is in on it. So you want to be able to express that. So when you see somebody else, and you're able to share that expression that you have, and you know, whether it's a tattoo or whether it's long hair, you feel like you're part of this community, right? That not too many people are a part of. And I think that, you know, in my experience, it's been very freeing because, you know, you're told in society that you have to be this, you have to be that, you have to live up to these standards, and basically you live, you get a paycheck, and then you die, right? And it's kind of in a way, it's like an FU to society, right?
Yep.
To have tattoos, to have long hair, to do whatever you want. Because, you know, in my experience, I feel like these people, they get that. They understand that life's not just about paycheck to paycheck. It's, you know, not to say that metalheads and gamers are the only people that get that, understand it, but that's the way that they express it, you know?
Sure thing. Now, Jason, I'll turn back to you, and we'll talk about now how you actually implement your love for metal when you're playing the game. So let's fire it up. You know, you've logged on, you're ready to go for a big session. What's on your playlist? What are you doing in game that you like to play along with metal music? Do you jump in a battleground and be like, it's metal time, baby? Or are you like, are you sitting in an inn crafting for half an hour going, it's metal time, baby? You know, talk to me about how you play it in the game.
Well, first of all, metal time is all the time. It never stops. But I mean, I think my primary focus in the game is endgame PvE. So whether it's dungeons or raids or whatever. And, I also tend to stream that stuff most of the time when I do it. And, what I tend to subject my stream audience to is, kind of like I was talking about at the top, where it's like whatever discography I'm just immersed in at that point in time. Like, I've just been plowing through all of Gamma Bomb's stuff for the last couple weeks. They just put a new record out and it really rips, and I've been really enjoying their stuff. And, I think it helps me focus. You know, I tank, and tanking is it's this very kind of rhythmic kind of gameplay. And it's a lot about situational awareness more than anything else, and about using the right thing at the right time. And I find that just like, especially really fast metal just helps me kind of zone out and pay attention to what I need to. And it helps me establish the rhythm of, you know, I'm also doing call outs for my team and stuff like that. So, I think that stuff, it just relaxes me, and it helps me focus on what I'm doing. So, which might sound kind of weird because you'd think a lot of the stuff is pretty intense and it might be distracting. But, I don't know. I've always felt it to be kind of calming. You know, it puts me in the right mindset, I think.
All right. Well, Defcamp, you play a different role when you raid, and you are a hardcore raider as well when you play the vanilla version of the game. And we've talked how you enjoy playing a priest, but you know, you've also been involved with your brother on the show about talking in depth about healing. So when you're healing in a raid, is it the metal playlist is up and you're thrashing along going, yeah, you fucking take that greater heal, motherfucker, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? Let me tell you something, Josh. For me, healing can get very repetitive, right? And it's important for me to keep that pace, to keep that intensity really going. So, whether I'm listening to some old school metal like some Sabbath, or I'm listening to some Testament, it's really, I really believe that there's a metal band out there for every experience, for every person, for every time of the night. So it really depends on my mood and what I'm doing. But there are so many different kinds of metal out there and so many different bands that absolutely, Josh, I will 100% be blasting some metal when I'm healing, without a doubt.
All right. Now, between the two of you, I found a post that I thought might be a bit fun to go through quickly, because I was Googling around and I was looking at, if something were, a genre of music in WoW, what would it be? And I found a great post on the official forums from June 6th of last year from a user named Oswill, who basically listed, if every class were a genre of music, this is what they would be. So I thought we'd quickly run through this list and see if you guys agree. So I'll start with the first one, and we'll go through it's all the retail classes. So we'll go through all of these. And they started number one. Obviously, they go Death Knights equals death metal because, well, death. Would we agree with that?
I think that's pretty much a no-brainer. Basically, yeah. I would say death metal would be the number one choice for DKs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, wait, they go into as you mentioned, there's a lot of subgenres of metal that I'm now about to find out about. So we'll get into that. So they said Warrior is thrash metal because they like to hit things. Does that sound right?
Okay.
I would go speed metal or thrash metal maybe. That would be acceptable. Yeah, that's probably the closest. Yeah.
Especially the way Melderon plays when he's always charging one thing after another after another after another. So yeah, nonstop charging. Yeah, definitely thrash.
Okay. Now they said Shaman's rap. I don't know, whatever.
Really? Definitely not.
Could you think of a subgenre of metal that would work for Shamans?
Maybe not, but maybe like psychedelic.
Is that a thing? Psychedelic metal?
I mean, it's not really metal, but you said rap,
right?
Oh,
sorry,
so
you mean psychedelic music in general. Yeah, no, I'm with you. All right, let's skip that. Druids, New Age. What do you reckon?
Druid, I gotta go folk metal.
Folk metal's a thing. Okay.
Yeah, folk metal is actually my favorite subgenre of the last 10 years or so. I've gotten really into it. It's super melodic. They use a lot of traditional instruments, traditional stringed instruments, or even wind instruments, stuff like that. Just anything that's going to add texture and be melodic. I definitely think I could see druids running around in the woods listening to some folk metal.
Nice. All right.
I can't argue with that. Yeah.
How about, I think this one is pretty self-explanatory as well. Punk music for rogues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe speed metal also. I mean,
yeah.
I could think of some pretty dirtbag speed metal bands that would fit the rogue aesthetic.
Yeah, right.
All right. Now I haven't heard of this.
I say dirtbag lovingly. I mean,
course.
if you're into this stuff, you probably know what I'm talking about. And I love those. There's a whole speed metal renaissance going on right now, and I love it. And that's the aesthetic,
Of course. Now, priests. I haven't heard of this one. Gothic classical rock.
Hmm.
That could work, I guess.
That could work. Are we talking Shadow Priest or
Shadow. Let's say Shadow. They said Shadow Priest.
Okay.
I mean, priest could be like neoclassical metal.
Yeah, we could do that for
anything in that area, like symphonic metal.
Yeah.
Now, just quickly, they said mages, they'd go house music for frost, pop for arcane, and rock for fire. That sounds like
separate genres per spec.
Yeah,
that's really
right.
intense.
That's right. The funniest one I think is hunters equals country.
Oh my god. I'm gonna have to tell Cargos about that,
yeah. Paladins apparently are pop music, like Backstreet Boys style.
Oh, no. Paladins are straight up power metal. That's the Knight in Shining Armor, man. That's Hammerfall. That's that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Paladins are straight up.
Nice.
Yeah, straight up power metal, charging into battle on their gleaming steed and hitting stuff with their maces all the way.
100% agree. Yeah.
All right. Now you'll have to help me out with this one. Warlocks. Now I think again, they've gone gothic metal for affliction. I think I know what gothic metal is, but then they've said black metal for demonology and destruction. What the fuck is black metal?
Yeah, Warlock all the way is black metal all the way around. Black metal is this like super lo-fi. It's almost like anti-music at its core, like the real core black metal bands. The virtues are like just complete lack of production, and almost indiscernible between the rhythm section, the guitars and the vocals. You know, it's just this wall of noise.
Complete mess.
It's like minor key and real ominous sounding. And over the years, I mean, the genre's developed a lot, and some of the bands that have pushed it in a more melodic and musical direction are kind of considered to be fake. So, black metal is a corner of the universe that I don't exist in too much, but that is like if a bunch of warlocks were going to start a metal band, they'd be like wolves in the throne room or something, like all the way.
Nice.
All undead warlocks, by the way, no gnomes allowed.
Now, monk, they've said classical Asian music, so I guess that could go hand in hand with that. Any metal music you could think of for a monk?
What's a monk? I'm kidding.
Exactly. Exactly. There's your classic player right there.
It's a little bit tricky because the whole monk aesthetic is about serenity kind of, you know, and serenity and metal don't really go together too much.
Maybe some a cappella Metallica.
There's a real heavy, you know, like real world Asian culture influence on the monk class.
Yep.
There is this band who some of their output I really enjoy called Tanger Cavalry. They're from New York City, but the guy who is their main creative force is actually from China, and he's ethnically Mongolian. Mm-hmm. And they do traditional Mongolian instruments in like a folk metal setting, and they do like throat singing and all kinds of crazy stuff over top of metal singing.
It is, my stepdad's Mongolian, and whenever we get the chance, it is beautiful, the Mongolian throat singing. It really is.
So it's not really an entire genre. That's just one band doing a very specific idiosyncratic take on a folk metal style, but I mean, that could be kind of monk-like.
Nice. And to round it all out, we've got Demon Hunter, and you mentioned this earlier, Jason, melodic metal. Would you agree with that?
Well, like melodic death metal. I could kind of see that. Yeah. Or maybe gent, which is like, it's a genre that really isn't a genre, but it's basically this one band from Sweden called Meshuggah that does this really technically intense kind of metal that's really frenetic sounding, and they kind of spawned an entire generation of imitators. Demon Hunters are kind of frenetic, and they're really powerful, and they sort of have this dual nature, right? This kind of split personality where they assume their demon form, and that kind of reminds me of like Meshuggah's music. So maybe somewhere in that category.
I was going to be a little more hard and on them and say Nickelback, but
all right.
I'm not a big fan of Demon Hunters.
Guys, now that we've gone through all that, thank you so much for that. I thought we'd go out on this one final point. Now, I just wanted to ask both of you, I'm the kind of person who I chase down video game music and covers of video game music. I like finding a rock band who has done, an old favorite NES theme or something. Like I love the mini bosses who do the Mega Man music and Castlevania music and stuff like that. And I'm a rock guy, not more than a metal guy, just generic rock. So that's great for me. Do you chase down metal covers of video game music at all?
I don't really. If somebody sends something my way, I'll check it out. Some of the stuff is cool, but it tends to be sort of hobbyist type of stuff. I kind of dig Power Glove, who they do more like they do a lot of video game music. They also do like animation, like Saturday morning cartoons. They do all kinds of stuff. They do a really broad range of stuff, but they've been around for a long time, and they are more of a they're like a live act. They tour, and they have a stage show, and they do the whole thing. So, in this day and age, it's pretty easy to put together a YouTube video and just put it out there into the world and just make something cool. But, that kind of stuff, it tends to be, its own sort of closed system. Whereas if somebody's out there doing the work, touring, playing on stage, that's what I kind of respond to more.
Yeah, same here. Everything I've heard on that has been kind of, someone on a YouTube channel or something like that, something small.
Sure thing. Well, look, here, we'll go out with this one, guys. I found something on YouTube. I found a clip that was, it's titled, if you're listening at home and you want to play this one along, Charlie Para, Legends of Azeroth 2, live at Legion Cafe, Germany. I wanted to get the two of you listening to this and see what you think of this, if it sings out to you at all, if it's like, this is not the kind of stuff that I would listen to while I'm playing the game. So tell me if you can hear this.
Yeah, this is like in a super traditional, like power metal style.
Right.
Which is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, I love it, dude. That's awesome.
Oh, so you kind of dig that?
Yeah, I'm digging it. Hell yeah.
Very nice. Well, I
mean,
mean,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, sorry, go on, Jason. You can say?
No, I mean, it's really clean. It's melodic, but it's fast. It's driving. It's very much in the tradition of the stuff that sort of built what metal became and sort of showed the potential in the space for this really intense guitar-driven music, so I dig it.
Yep. Excellent.
Some kick-ass guitar solos, man. I mean, you can't go wrong with that.
Excellent. All right, guys. Well, look, we'll leave you there. I've kept you on the call way longer than, as I always do. I tell people it'll be a certain amount of time and then I double it. I'm so sorry. Jason, thank you so much. You've been a legend. I really do appreciate you coming on to the show, and it was such a pleasure meeting you.
I don't know what you thought you were getting yourself into when you asked me to come here and talk to you about not only World of Warcraft but also heavy metal. I mean, the fact that we're getting out of here inside of like 45 minutes or whatever is a record. So, but thank you so much for the invite, man. I hope we can work out doing some stuff with you for TSE in the lead up to Classic coming out this summer. And yeah, it was great getting to meet you at BlizzCon. All the luck with the show, man. I really respect all the work you've been doing with it and all the success you've had. So, just keep pounding away, man.
Will do. Thanks so much, mate. And Defcamp, mate, brother, you're always welcome here. Thank you so much again for coming on.
Thank you, Josh. Always a pleasure, man. And, the countdown is, coming to an end soon, man. We got summer. That's all we got till.
That's right. We'll be there soon, mate. We'll be there soon. All right, guys, I'll leave you there. Thanks so much again. Hi everyone, Josh here. Just a quick interlude to remind you all that if you're enjoying these in-depth conversations that Countdown to Classic brings you on a regular basis, then please do visit the show's Patreon page to see how you can help support Countdown to Classic to continue to bring you more of this kind of content that you're now so used to hearing on the show. A bunch of the money that you put into the show goes straight back into it, such as the new music that you'll hear in this episode, and the brand spanking new microphone and boom arm that I'm using now and trying to figure out how to get the most out of. So think of it as an investment in Countdown to Classic. You can also help the show out by mentioning the show to a friend, perhaps in-game. Talk about what you hear on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, or wherever you're actively discussing things. Follow me on Twitch at Countdown to Classic, or leave the show a review on iTunes. If you want to hit me up with some feedback or submit a memory lane or anger management of your own, you can always get me at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com or reach out to me via the show's amazing Discord. Finally, if you can't get enough of me for some reason, then please do also check out my other podcast, The Cinephiles. That's SINNERFILES.com. If you haven't already, for great comedic takes on all your favorite movies from yesteryear. Now, let's get back to the show. All right, we've got another Countdown to Classic listener on the line, and not just any listener, it's a Countdown to Classic Hall of Famer, Minorou. Thank you so much for joining again. How are you?
Hello, I'm Minorou, and great to be here.
Thanks so much for coming back on the show, mate. Now, you're here in relation to a topic that has almost consumed you recently. You have been writing into the show, which has been fantastic. I've read a few of your stories or emails recently about this topic, and it's turned into a relatively interesting topic because some people have been getting back to you on this one, and you've been engaging with people on the Discord about it, about whether or not the Horde and Alliance were actually technically at war during World of Warcraft. Now, a few episodes back, I can't remember the exact number, I read one of your latest emails that gave some great examples of some evidence that you found. And, that's great. This is the kind of show where we champion hard evidence. So if you just want to remind people, just a quick recap before we go into the next chapter of what you found last time and how that piqued your interest in this sort of question.
Yes, it was in episode 76 of the Horde Onyxia attunement quest chain, where Thrall himself, your character talks to Thrall himself, and he says that skirmishes and smaller battles do take place, but there is peace. And
That's right.
Your character asks, hey, Onyxia is poised to just destroy the Alliance from within. Why don't we just let her do it? And Thrall just says no.
That's right. I remember now. And that was obviously some pretty solid, hard evidence that there was, maybe an uncomfortable one, but perhaps some peace going on, which is ironic given that the title of the game is World of Warcraft. And we obviously contrast all of what we're about to say with, and I'm sure you may well raise it again at some point. We get that opening cinematic to the game and the opening voiceover, which basically tells us that, well, war is perhaps, now, sorry, remind me, the exact wording. I always muck it up. Do you remember the exact wording of that voiceover?
Yes, I have a whole bunch of notes.
Oh, great.
Let me tell you, we're going to cover all of that.
All right. Well, let's get straight into it. Now, you contacted me and said, Josh, I've got some more evidence. I've got more stuff I want to get on the show that might dive a bit deeper into answering this question of whether or not we are in a state of war. So I'm handing the reins over to you. Go nuts, Minorou. Hit us up with what you found.
All right, yeah. So you requested I call in as a follow-up to the submission in episode 76.
That's right.
And ever since I got that submission, I got that feedback, and it made me do way more research and made me even reconsider my position. So let's first start off with evidence for the war, follow up with evidence against the war, then come to a conclusion. That sound good?
I love it. You're a true Countdown to Classic listener when you're arguing for both sides. Fantastic. Let's get into it.
All right. Now, I don't blame people if they think this call is going to be uninteresting, but dang it, someone's got to talk about the lore. So strap yourselves in, stay a while and listen. This is going to take some time. All right. Let's start with the evidence for the war. And I mean, how could I have concluded that there was no war? It was all over the marketing. It's World of Warcraft. On the back of the box, it advertises that you can negotiate the vast battle-scarred landscape of a world at war. And, when you mentioned my part one of There's No War, you mentioned the opening cinematic as evidence for war.
Mm-hmm.
The narration of that cinematic stated, "The tenuous pact between the Horde and the Alliance has all but evaporated. The drums of war thunder once again."
That's right.
All right, yeah. So that's one thing for the war, as well as, the back of the box thing. Then when you begin the game and create a character and the camera sweeps over the landscape, the beginning zone narration for dwarves and humans both say that the armies of Stormwind and Ironforge were called away to fight the Horde, and it's up to the players to defend the kingdoms in their place.
Okay.
And unfortunately, none of the other race narrations directly mention a Horde Alliance conflict, so it's actually only the humans and dwarves that actually say that.
Mm-hmm.
There are also, a few quests in the game that pit the Alliance and Horde against each other, or at least NPCs. Specifically Ashenvale, like the quest Ashenvale Outrunners.
Mm-hmm.
But however, the quests that are most obviously in favor of the war, of course, the Battlegrounds quests.
Right.
Now, this quest would take forever, or this call would go on forever if I went over every single one. So just for the sake of brevity, let's just go over the stats, because I crunched the numbers. So 116 non-duplicate Battleground related quests.
Wow.
13 of them reference war. 7 of them are just generic uses of the phrase, such as war zone, war effort, machines of war, etc. 4 of them reference the battleground conflicts as war, but they're just localized to just the battlegrounds themselves. So it's like, oh, this war is going on, and it's just referencing Alterac Valley or Arathi Basin. And then the remaining 2 quests reference war between the Alliance and Horde at large. So, yeah, pardon the quick rundown there, but yes, those in favor of the war have it through quests as well.
Okay. I'm loving the research so far. This is amazing. Keep going.
So, yeah, those are major points in favor of the war. And you can also argue that PvP servers are also evidence in favor of the war, but it can also be easily argued that normal servers are evidence against the war, so we can't really use server options as evidence.
Yep, I'm with you there.
There's also some other stuff like the Eastern Plaguelands towers or Silithist, but there's not really lore backings of that. It's just gameplay mechanics. It's up to you if you want to put those up there or not.
Okay.
Okay, so that's that. Let's throw in some evidence against the war. As I mentioned before in the earlier podcast episode 76, during the Onyxia Attunement questline, Thrall himself said, skirmishes and smaller battles do take place, but there is peace.
Oh,
he's
God,
not blind.
Please do more of the Thrall voice. That's amazing.
Okay, I'm just saying he's not blind to the small conflicts around him, but the world at large is not at war, nor does he wish to start one. And let's all go to the Alliance side, a low-level quest in Stormwind called Harlan Needs a Resupply.
Mm-hmm.
Your character is tasked with delivering a cloth supply note to Rima in the Canal Tailor Shop. She remarks, it says here that Harlan's business is booming. That's good news, but I wonder why people have need of all that armor. I've heard nothing of open war. Is there something the nobles aren't telling us? Now that's a hint. That's a hint of Onyxia's schemes seen in a quest you can take at level 1.
Mm-hmm.
A testament to the great storytelling of vanilla WoW. So, tell me, if the leadership of the Horde, like the war chief of the Horde tells us there's no war, and the common people of the Alliance tells us there's no war, where is the war?
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. You've got me on the hook here.
Then, this one admittedly isn't as great of evidence, but I'm gonna throw it in here anyway. Low-level Horde quest in Durotar, Vanquish the Betrayers. The quest giver gives us a bit of a lore dump for Warcraft 3, and hey, since you're loving it, I'm going to read it like a Warcraft 2 briefing because that's more fun.
Oh God, please do.
Led by Admiral Proudmoore, the humans of Kul'Tiras encroached upon Durotar, violating the war chief's pact made with Jaina Proudmoore in order to defeat Archimonde years ago. The human aggression was repelled and Tiragard Keep fell. But recently, the Admiral's reserves have retaken the keep and once again pose a threat to our homeland. These humans show no respect for diplomacy.
I love it. These humans. Very good.
And yes, it was pronounced Kul'Tiras back in the Warcraft 2 days. Alright, so that aside, now hold up. Diplomacy? Why mention diplomacy? If the two factions were at war, retaking a keep would be expected behavior. And the quest name, Vanquish the Betrayers. Diplomacy and betrayal implies amicable ties are being cut, not that two bitter enemies were playing out their games of war. And I guess it should also be noted that Kul'Tiras is not, it's like they're part of the Alliance pretty much in name only during vanilla, and we kind of get that in Battle for Azeroth with, get Kul'Tiras in the Alliance.
Yep.
Alright, now we look to one of the Warcraft novels, which are considered canon. Spoilers for a 12-year-old book, by the way. In the novel Cycle of Hatred, which is set 1 year before vanilla starts, Thrall kills his most trusted advisor for instigating hostilities against Theramore. Granted, he was also a member of the Burning Blade and consorting with demons. That was a part of it. But Thrall executed him on both charges. Now, does that sound like they're at war to you?
Not so much.
Alright, so, officially, there is no war and the factions are at peace. Unofficially, tensions are rising and preparations are being made for war. Fights between the factions are not swept under the table, but paraded in the streets of all the main cities on the weekends when battleground representatives just offer a call to arms.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have points for the war and points against the war. So how do we actually reconcile this to make this all consistent? I can offer two explanations for this discrepancy, and the first is kind of chronological. Most of the quests I've referenced, such as the ones with Thrall and Rima, were in the game at release, patch 1.1. The honor system, battlegrounds, battle masters, and world PvP objectives like the Eastern Plagueland towers and Silithist came out in later patches. And that can suggest lore-wise that the piece was relatively stable at first, but then crumbled away as time passed. But I think we all know the second real reason. Vanilla World of Warcraft was made by a company full of designers, developers, executives, and marketers who were simply trying to make and sell a good game. Mm-hmm. They didn't agree with each other's decisions all the time, as evidenced by developer interviews. Well, like your developer interviews with John Statz and Bo Bell and all that.
Yep.
Developers got into heated debates just to get PvP into the game. This sort of led to mixed messages. The opening cinematic video and the patches named Call to War and Drums of War versus the established characterizations of Thrall, Jaina, the peace treaties between them, quests involving diplomacy and avoiding conflict. The developers just had to balance gameplay over lore, and compromises had to be made between them. And because of this, through marketing, lore, and game mechanics, the Horde and Alliance appear both at war and not at war simultaneously. It's no wonder that people are mystified over the nebulous state of affairs. Why else would Thrall, who hates unnecessary conflict, do nothing while the Warsong clan is actively invading Ashenvale and inviting war in Orgrimmar's backyard? Because they needed a convenient excuse for a gameplay mode.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks to John Statz's book, The WoW Diary, we now know a lot more about stuff behind the scenes in the creation of Vanilla World of Warcraft. In several parts of the book, and even in promotional parts outside the book, he mentions that he and the other developers were in a constant tug of war between lore and gameplay. When he made Blackwing Lair, lore dictated that, like, the top of Blackrock Spire, it's just the top of a mountain. So it's like a tall, thin structure, but you can't fight a boss in a tall, thin structure. It needs, flat places.
Mm-hmm.
So you need flat open spaces to fight a boss, but they can't do that. So they had to sacrifice lore for gameplay.
Yeah. You basically need a dance hall in there.
Yeah, exactly. And it was the exact same thing with Karazhan. It's a tall, thin tower, and that's why it was pushed to Burning Crusade, even though it was in development since early vanilla. And so, let's go back to that opening cinematic, the one about the drums of war, thunder once again.
Mm-hmm.
According to the WoW Diary, Kritz Metzen, the lore guy, he didn't actually want that in the game. He wanted something else, something that described the creation of Azeroth to introduce players into the world. And other developers at Blizzard thought that would be too boring and made it about the player raises and conflict instead.
Okay, is that in John's book?
Yes, it is. And so it's like Titans creating Azeroth? That's not going to interest people. Let's make it about races fighting each other, because that sounds more exciting and it's going to sell the game better. So what we ended up with is a marketing video. It's not a lore piece.
Fair enough. I mean, those are some great points. Now, my one question flowing on from all of that, and you've done, can I just say, such an amazing job. I'm absolutely blown away by the amount of research and work that you've put into this, and I'm so glad that we did this call. But ultimately, you've now said that there are arguments for both points there, and you may have drawn a conclusion. What is your final conclusion?
My conclusion is that they're both at war and not at war because of inconsistencies in game design.
Well, sorry, I appreciate that you're saying that. I guess what I'm getting at is, are you suggesting that we don't have to answer the question, that the ambiguous nature of the design versus the lore just leaves it a question mark? Or do you feel that, gun to your head, as players, we are forced to kind of choose one? It's kind of like, the end of Inception. Like, is the top still spinning or not? If you had to pick, what would you say?
Yeah, actually, the top still spinning is probably the best metaphor to really put it. We can't really say for sure, because Chris Metzen would probably say, no, there isn't war, but everyone else, or most of the people in the game development, would probably say, yes, there is. And who do you really trust in that scenario?
Exactly. Are we still sleeping? So let's have a think about that one. That's a phenomenal point that you've raised, Minorou. I really enjoyed that. If I can weigh in personally, just sort of hearing all that for the first time and just giving you my gut reaction. Look, a part of me wants to, if we just go off of the evidence that you presented in game, and one of the weird things that I really latched onto that you mentioned that I'm sort of struggling to let go of is you talked about that early level 1 quest that the common folk of Stormwind have openly discussed with the player that, no, everything's all good. There's no war. Like, what are you talking about? I would think it's something that, to me, that resonates, because if anyone's going to know if their lands are being plundered, if their lives are being fucked with, it's the common folk. And the fact that they're at peace and not particularly troubled by what the Horde is doing or what the Alliance is doing or what have you, then I would think you start with the people and they're cool. Whereas the evidence with Thrall, that could go a bit more towards, okay, behind the scenes, maybe he's, the higher ups aren't really considering themselves at war, even though what may look like a war is going on out in the open. So you could take that a certain way, but with the common folk, I actually attach a lot of weight to their word. Do you kind of get what I'm saying?
Oh, definitely. Especially with the added thing of the human starting zone narration saying that the armies of Stormwind have left to fight the Horde. Like, how does that pair with that?
That does seem to be a bit of a contradiction, doesn't it?
Yeah. If the armies of Stormwind have left, how do the common people not know that? Because that would be like their brothers, their sisters, their sons.
Yeah. He left to get smokes a week ago. I haven't seen him for a while.
People may think that Blizzard was retconning the lore with Burning Crusade Blue Goat Draenei spaceships, but honestly, they were messing with the lore right from the start of vanilla. It just wasn't as visible.
It's really interesting to take on board. Now, one thing I'll ask you, and again, I'm going to thank you one more time for that. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed that, and I know a lot of the listeners are really going to enjoy that, and they love hearing from you on things like this. But you mentioned obviously John Statz's book, which was made available in PDF format relatively recently for people who did purchase it via the Kickstarter. You sound like you've consumed it in full. Have you enjoyed it?
Oh, yeah. I swallowed that thing in like 2 days. I really enjoyed it.
So you recommend it?
Oh, wholeheartedly. If you have any interest in vanilla World of Warcraft and you just want to know how the hot dog was made, I guess, because sometimes it's not as flattering. It's not all sunshine and roses. Yeah, give it a read.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it. As everyone knows, I got about 100 pages of it before I interviewed John now about 2 or so months ago, and I really enjoyed what I read. But I know what I've read is only, a third or a quarter of the book, and even though I did obviously purchase it on Kickstarter and I've gotten the PDF copy and everything, I'm holding off because I'm just one of those guys. I want the hard copy in my hand. I want to turn the pages and all that jazz. That's something that I enjoy. It's why I don't own a Kindle. But I'm really looking forward to hopefully getting that at Christmas or just in January when John plans on shipping that. So I'm so glad that you've thoroughly enjoyed it and that it's chock full of amazing information, which I'm sure we'll talk about on the show. Maybe once the book has shipped and I've had a chance to read it myself, we might do a bit of a book review episode if that's okay with you.
Perhaps, yeah.
Fantastic. All right, mate. Well, look, all I can say is thank you so much again for, putting in the work, for yourself and for the show. And I'm sure the listeners, please do thank Minorou for that amazing, research that he's done if you enjoyed that. And, I know I did, and I can say thank you, mate. And I can't wait to speak to you again on the show.
Yeah, and if people come up with some counterpoints, throw them my way.
Oh, absolutely. That's a good point, actually. Just before I let you go, you have been speaking with another member of the Countdown to Classic Discord, Forbes, I believe, and you started going back and forth with him. Was he providing some good evidence against your argument, or were you collaborating on some of this stuff?
No, we were hoping to get him or her. I don't know exactly, but we were trying to get them on the call, but unfortunately we couldn't just time it correctly. They were going by lore. I was going more with a game design perspective.
Fair enough. Well, look, we'll try and get Forbes in on another call, if they hear this and want to, either add to it or provide a contrary opinion. And I think that's a great answer that you've given us, and we'll see if anyone else has their tinfoil hat on and can come up with an alternative, solution to this theory. But, thanks once again, Minorou. We'll talk to you later.
Alrighty. Take care, everybody.
And that's everything from those calls for now. I really do hope you all enjoyed those, and another big thank you to everyone who called in for those chats. Now, recently I reached out to the Countdown to Classic Discord and told them that I was playing with the idea of starting even another new segment on the show centered around stories of drama from old run-ins with guildies or ninja looting occurrences or just general scandal during people's time in Azeroth. And next thing I knew, that channel blew up, and the listeners were shoving each other out of the way to vent about a bit of drama that happened to them. And so, without further ado, I am proud to debut a new regular segment on Countdown to Classic by presenting Dramacraft. In Dramacraft, we recount listeners' stories of guild or loot drama from back in the day. So we start with listener Thaloris, who tells us this. Exhibit A. A guild with a raiding retribution paladin that cleared all of Nax in under 3 weeks from it opening up, meaning Blackwing Lair / AQ40 gear primarily, versus Exhibit B, an elitist guild that had already choked for over a month on KT, but who then spent another 3.5 months choking until they finally finished Nax, meaning all 40 people being in BIS forever gear. The background. I used to be a loyal raiding member in the Exhibit B elitist guild, but alas they chose to blame me and lol ret for their KT wipes and completely restricted my access to loot. I decided to leave the guild as a result, even though I had been a part of the guild since its inception 5 months prior. What ended up happening once I left? They proceeded to do worse on their KT attempts and ended up choking for another 3.5 months, even though literally everyone in the guild was in BIS forever. Now I ask you, which is the worst guild? The one with the Retribution Paladin who cleared all of Nax in under 3 weeks, or the one with the elitist chokers who took another 3.5 months to finally do the same job? Moral of the story? People blaming their failures on you for the way you spec is not a valid argument to make when they don't know how to play in the first place. Next we have this one from Seven Winters who says this. I shared this before and it happened in the Burning Crusade, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. I was in a guild in the Burning Crusade clearing through SSC. It was actually a really good guild. I remember we got server first, Lady Vash. Anyways, one night in Vent after a raid, the GM, me and a couple of members were chilling in Vent, and the GM told us how he had ninja'd his previous guild's guild bank and server transferred in the middle of the night, bragging about all the gold that he had made. He was proud of it. I said, what's stopping you from doing the same thing to us since you have access to our guild bank? Within seconds I was banned from Vent, and a few seconds later, G kicked. I was upset, but figured I'd dodged a bullet and joined another raiding guild. A few weeks later, I get a message from someone I knew still in that old guild, and you'll never guess what happened. The GM ninja'd the guild bank and server transferred in the middle of the night. Who could have ever seen that coming? Another time I was leading a pug and a strength two-hander dropped. A hunter won the role, but me not being an idiot awarded it to the warrior instead. That kind of stuff happened all the time, but apparently the hunter happened to be the girlfriend of one of the officers in my own guild, so that officer was furious with me and told me that he was going to talk to the other officers that night, and if they didn't decide to guild kick me, he was going to leave himself. Well, the other officers / guild leader decided not to kick me, but the officer that was upset never left either like he said he would. That really bothered me because he was on the loot council, and I bet he never voted for me after that. Next we have Verpingut, who tells us this. Like, seriously, I found out after raiding hardcore through vanilla with this hunter, some months into the Burning Crusade we're raiding heavy and all is good, and someday on Ven we're talking about keybinds, and he goes, fuck that, I've always just clicked my spells. And Vent goes silent. 3 weeks of wiping on Cthulhu because those tentacles didn't die fast enough, and you are telling me you don't have keybinds? He was terrible, but he was an OG guild member from the beginning with nice raid attendance. In SSC, we had a hunter pet doing more damage than him sometimes. He was the nicest guy in the world though. And finally, we have this one from Tian SG, who tells us this. Gather round, children, and let me tell you of the one time my Horde guild let me raid lead and master loot, and why they never allowed me to again. It was an average day of WoW, though not one of our usual big raid nights. We still needed to run ZG and AQ20 and had enough people online to start up a group. Only one of our normal raid leaders was online, but as a young class leader myself, he said to me, "My friend, tonight take the reins of this 20-man raid so as to gain experience and to prove that you may be worthy of leading larger raids in the future." Well, he actually said something closer to, "Hey, wanna lead ZG? I'm high as fuck." Anyways, I formed the group, but we ran into a slight issue. We were missing a few spots. But I figured, no trouble, we can easily find 3 or 4 pugs to fill in the gaps. What could go wrong? So 3 or 4 pugs were found, with little care towards their quality since we assumed we would roll the face of ZG with the rest of our experienced crew. But alas, in inviting the pugs, I made an unfortunately critical error. It was common acceptance if a guild was running a raid and needed a few pugs that the guild could reserve sword and highly sought after items for guild members. In ZG, that was commonly one of the 2 extremely rare mounts, the raptor and the tiger. I did not reserve them. What, thought I, are the chances those will drop anyways? We certainly did face roll through ZG as we expected. The pugs were not very useful, but they also didn't wipe us, so no harm, no foul. As the tiger boss fell a little over an hour into the raid, it seemed we were on a great pace and sure to finish swiftly with no drama. And then, as I went to check the loot, I saw it. The tiger mount. A mount I have never, in all my years playing vanilla and even later on private servers, seen drop before or since. First came the gasps in vent. Then came the whispers. "Dude, I'll pay you 1,000 gold for that. We're best friends, man. Just let me take it. You should give it to the normal raid leader in exchange for a promise on future loots, lol." But no, I said to the whispers, one and all, I am an honourable man. All shall have an equal chance. But what of the pugs, people began to say. The 3 or 4 I had brought along spoke. I faltered. More whispers. "No way, dude, guildies only. You have to let us roll, that'd be bullshit, you didn't reserve it. Seriously, man, 1,500 gold, right now." But my honour won out. I knew what the right answer was. Besides, with only 3 pugs, what are the chances one of them would win the roll? So, we rolled. And as the rolls came in, one stood out. A 99. From a hunter. One of the 3 pugs I had brought along. This was the most trying moment for me. The whispers were fast and furious, many boiling over into raid chat and vent. Guildies and friends, or so I believed, cajoling and threatening me. But I made what to this day I still consider the correct decision. That hunter won the roll. I had not reserved it for the guild, it was theirs. When the little chat indicating it had gone to them showed up, it was chaos. Half the guildies left the raid then and there, a couple put me on ignore. And then, as people hearthed and left the raid, the hunter asked me, "Sorry, I can't seem to use it. It says I need to train up my riding." And thus this is why I don't lead raids. Thanks so much to all of you for those fantastic submissions. That was a great one to go out on. I hope you all enjoyed this initial installment of Dramacraft, and if you liked it and want to hear more, feel free to add to it. Send me your dramatic stories of guild or loot drama from your time in World of Warcraft, and I will read it on the show as you've just heard. But now it's been quite a while since we went through some lore on the show, and I know so many of you do enjoy it, so I recently asked Countdown to Classic patrons to vote on which piece of lore they would like to hear next, and from the options presented, their vote was cast, and thus, I'm now happy to read you a huge chunk of lore in the semi-regular segment, That's Lore Like It. The hinterlands, located in the northern part of the Eastern Kingdoms, are probably most notable for the Wildhammer dwarves, who make their residence at Airy Peak in the west. The Wildhammers have always been staunch allies of the Alliance. It's from the hinterlands that these dwarves find and tame their world-renowned griffins, as the Razorbeak griffins roam wild in this region. Also in the hinterlands is one of the last remaining settlements of the High Elves in Lordaeron at the Keldanil Lodge. The hinterlands are also home to a large population of forest trolls, which are divided into 3 separate tribes. The Reventusk tribe is the only one of the 3 that has declared sides in the Horde/Alliance conflict, and support the war chief Thrall of the Horde. The Vilebranch tribe holds residence in the massive troll city of Jintha Alor, as well as the altar of Zul, while the Witherbark tribe holds the smallest influence, hailing from the temples of Shadra Alor. In the northern part of the region is the ancient massive tree Seradane, where the agents of the Green Dragonflight have been corrupted. A massive portal on the side of the tree connects the servants of the dragon aspect Ysera to her own realm, the Emerald Dream. So we have 3 key stakeholders in this region, as I won't go into the Ysera stuff just yet, but we'll be getting pretty deep on 3 races here who have taken up residence in the hinterlands. So, how about we actually begin with the Wildhammer dwarves? The Wildhammer clan is a dwarf clan, currently centered mainly in the hinterlands, although many others can be found in Kalimdor as well. Now a part of the Alliance, the Wild Dwarves hold the Horde as enemies. The Wildhammer dwarves are hill dwarves or mountain dwarves. Renowned for their close bond with griffins, they treat these animals as equals in battle instead of pets, leading to numerous successes in the Second and Third Wars. They also value nature very highly. Members of the clan consist of a race of dwarves known as Wildhammer dwarves, also known as Wild dwarves, Feral dwarves, Wildhammers, and Airy dwarves. Butterflies is a derogatory term for the Wildhammer clan due to their affinity for flying around on their griffins. So, let's dive pretty deep here, and like all dwarves, the Wildhammer clan are descendants of the Earthen, stony, Titan-forged beings that were created by the Titanic Keepers to help shape the subterranean regions of the world during the Ordering of Azeroth. So, the dwarves came to be. A whole bunch of stuff happened, which we'll get into another episode when we tackled dwarves on the whole, and then we got to the War of the Three Hammers, which we heard all about in episode number 34 of the show, and we'll pick up our story from there with a small reminder note from that great war. So, just prior to the War of the Three Hammers, we had the Wildhammer clan, ruled by Thane Cardros Wildhammer, with Thane being an honorary title bestowed upon clan leaders, nobility or royalty in Dwarvish and Vrykul societies. The Wildhammers inhabited the foothills and crags around the base of Ironforge. The clan was unsuccessful in wresting control of Ironforge from the Bronzebeard and Dark Iron clans during the civil unrest there that turned into the War of the Three Hammers. So, Cardros and his Wildhammer warriors travelled north through the barrier gates of Dunal Gaz, the tunnelled mountain pass area between Loch Madan and the wetlands, and founded their own kingdom within the distant peak of Grim Batol, a mountain fortress located in the eastern wetlands. There, the Wildhammers thrived and rebuilt their stores of treasure. Thorasan and his Dark Irons vowed revenge against Ironforge. Thorasan and his sorceress wife Modgud launched a 2-pronged assault against both Ironforge and Grim Batol. As Modgud confronted the enemy warriors, she used her powers to strike fear into their hearts. Shadows moved at her command, and dark things crawled up from the depths of the earth to stalk the Wildhammers in their own halls. Eventually, Modgud broke through the gates and laid siege to the fortress itself. The Wildhammers fought desperately, with Cardros himself wading through the masses to slay the sorceress queen. With their queen lost, the Dark Irons fled before the fury of the Wildhammers. Once the immediate Dark Iron threat was eliminated, the Wildhammers returned home to Grim Batol. However, the death of Modgud had left an evil stain on the mountain fortress, and the Wildhammers found it uninhabitable. Due to Grim Batol being uninhabitable, the Wildhammers were invited to live in Ironforge with the ruling Bronzebeard clan. However, Cardros refused, not willing to relive the shadows of the past. Cardros took his people north towards the lands of Lordaeron, settling within a mountainous region called Northerron, as well as in the lush forests of the hinterlands. Later, the Wildhammers crafted the city of Airy Peak in the hinterlands, where they grew closer to nature and even bonded with the mighty griffins of the area. Because of the horrific underground battles the Wildhammers were forced to fight against the Dark Iron Dwarves during the war, the Wildhammers chose to build most of their dwellings above ground instead of burrowing into the mountain as is typical of dwarven designs. This principle was applied with the city of Airy Peak, which was built into a mountainside. Although the in-game appearance of Airy Peak looks like a small town, it's described as a majestic, sprawling city in lore. The in-game model of the elaborate carving at Airy Peak could be viewed as the front of a griffin on its forelegs, or simply an eagle perching, since no lion features are shown. However, several sources state that Airy Peak is shaped like a griffin. Following the ravaging of Loch Modan during the Second War, the Horde pushed farther north into the wetlands, taking Dun Algaz, Dun Moda, and Grimbatol and converting them into fortresses for the Horde. Grimbatol became the primary base for the land offensive, and was also converted into a hatchery for the enslaved red dragonflight. Thandol Span, a massive bridge located in an area once known as the Thandol Valley, was a pivotal battleground in the Second War, constantly shifting in possession between the two factions. The Horde's conquest of Grimbatol likely led the Wildhammer dwarves to join forces with the Alliance of Lordaeron. From the ominous and foreboding peaks of Northerron come the dwarven Griffin Riders. Mounted upon their legendary beasts and wielding the mystic Stormhammers forged deep within the secret chambers of their aviaries, these feral dwarves fear no enemy and rely upon no friend. They have allied themselves only with the elves of Kel'Thalas, distrusting both their dwarven cousins and the humans alike. When the call to battle is sounded, however, they can be counted upon to fight alongside any who oppose the Horde. The Wildhammer clan, led at that time by Curdran Wildhammer, came under attack by what ultimately proved to be a diversionary tactic by Warchief Orgrim Doomhammer. The Warchief deduced that if he sent a force to attack the hinterlands, the Alliance would respond, allowing him to take the remainder of his forces into Kel'Thalas with the aid of Zul'jin and the Amani tribe. More on them soon. Realizing their plans, Anduin Lothar, the supreme commander of the armies of the Alliance of Lordaeron during the Second War, dispatched Turalian and Khadgar, two famous heroes from the Second War and onwards, and sent them, along with half the Alliance forces, to travel north to Kel'Thalas and come to the aid of the elves, while he aided Curdran in clearing out the remaining Horde forces in the hinterlands. Curdran pledged his and his kingdom's aid to Anduin Lothar, after the Human Alliance aided them in forcing the invading orcs and forest trolls out of their homeland. Curdran and his Wildhammers later came to the aid of Dalen Proudmoore's forces in the Great Sea, allowing the Admiral's fleet to focus on Horde ships while the Griffin Riders battled the Dragon Riders of the Horde. The Wildhammer Griffin Riders, under the command of Proudmoore and with the aid of the forces of Kultiras, attacked Durotar and the Darkspear tribe's home of Echo Isles. Though they inflicted damage to the Darkspear, they were ultimately pushed back and driven out. Meanwhile, Falstad Wildhammer, a noble Griffin Rider, and other Alliance heroes reached Grimbatol and fought in the final battle there to free the Red Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza. Following the Second War, Curdran Wildhammer went to Draenor as part of the Alliance expedition. Falstad stayed in Airy Peak to succeed him as the High Thane and rule the Wildhammer clan. Curdran and his Griffin Riders participated in the invasion of Draenor. This invasion was a conflict which followed in the aftermath of the Second War between the Alliance of Lordaeron and the Horde of Draenor, as the Alliance took aggressive steps to contain the Orcish threat, going as far as to venture to the Orcs' homeworld to try to end the threat once and for all. He served as a scout and warrior for the Alliance expedition when Ner'zhul opened his unholy portals. Curdran elected to remain with his comrades on Draenor and ensure that the Dark Portal was sealed to prevent it from harming Azeroth. The Wildhammers eventually presumed him dead, and as one of the heroes willing to sacrifice their lives to safeguard Azeroth, Curdran Wildhammer would have a statue in his likeness built in the Valley of Heroes to honor him for his heroic deeds. The daring dwarves of the Wildhammer clan responded once again to answer the call to war during the Third War. They brought the mighty griffins of the Airy Peaks to aid the Alliance in its time of need. Armed with their trusty lightning-powered stormhammers, the fearless wild dwarves sought to keep the skies of Lordaeron free from enemy forces. The proud griffins shared their riders' implacable resolve and stood as noble symbols of the Alliance's fortitude. As of the time of World of Warcraft, the most immediate threat to the Wildhammer security comes from the east in the form of the Witherbark tribe, Vilebranch trolls, and the horde-aligned Reventusk trolls. The rugged terrain of the hinterlands is not only home to the Wildhammer dwarves and their griffins, but also to these hostile forest troll tribes. The trolls view the Wildhammers as squatters on their ancestral lands and spare no opportunity to accost the dwarves by attacking the Griffin Aeries. The Wildhammers of Airy Peak were not part of the Reformed Alliance after the Third War, but were still friendly and helpful to Alliance adventurers that have proven their worth to them. However, the Wildhammer dwarves of Airy Peak did strike an alliance with the High Elves of Keldanil, much to the ire of their common enemy, the Reventusk trolls. For a while, the Wildhammer clan was not technically part of the Alliance as they were originally neutral. Though they still kept ties with the Alliance members and even worked with the Alliance, they still valued their independence too much to formalize their relationship. Their relationship with the Griffins of the Hinterlands has proven profitable as the Alliance has established an extensive travel network using these flying beasts. In addition to convenient travel, the Wildhammer are an important military force. Considering the presence of Airy Griffins in Alterac Valley, it seems an expedition from the Wildhammer clan of Airy Peak participated in the battle there as well. There are rumours of members of the Wildhammer clan residing in the human city of Stormwind, as well as the dwarven city of Ironforge. Wildhammers and the High Elves of Keldanil shared much in common in the past, including a love of nature and hatred of evil. Many High Elves have grown introverted and brooding of late, which concerns the Wildhammers. The dwarves are appalled at the defection of the Blood Elves, an event which has caused them to see their High Elf allies with new eyes. The Wildhammer dwarves also get along well with Night Elves, as the two races share much in common. The Wildhammers train young griffins, and the dwarves rely on action and deeds to prove one's worth, and many may require one to slay a threatening enemy of the dwarves or perform a task that benefits their community before you gain their trust. A Wildhammer may also just challenge a potential ally to a fight just to test if they are strong enough to fight by their side. Though self-reliant, Wildhammer dwarves are expected to look out for each other no matter the clan. Only a coward, a disgrace to the Wildhammer, would turn down the call of their people, especially in a dire time. In terms of their communities, Wildhammers value three things: independence, family bonds, and their griffins. Wildhammers revere the griffin as a sacred animal. The griffins, in turn, suppress their natural aggression and territorial behavior to assist the wild dwarves who share their mountain homes. The Wildhammer dwarves act as companions, caretakers, and trainers to the griffins. They're majestic creatures of the skies, and more than just beasts. They're intelligent and cunning. Some say the Wildhammers keep them as pets, but it's more of a friendship. They do everything to protect their kin and their griffins. That includes chasing off predators, whether they be from the forest or from the horde. Wildhammers are trained to fight using their trusty Stormhammers while riding their griffin friends, a partnership which makes Wildhammer griffin riders renowned. Stormhammers are their magical weapons made at a sacred, enchanted forge that lies at the heart of each griffin aviary. A Stormhammer, when thrown, strikes with the fury of lightning and the force of thunder. This destructive weapon, combined with the indomitable spirit of the Griffin Riders, justifies their position as masters of the skies. The first known human to have earned their own Stormhammer and wield it was Liren of Airy Peak, a human boy raised amongst the Wildhammers from infancy, who went on to become a Griffin Rider. Usually, Wildhammer Griffin riders fight with those who are from the same family and fight in groups under the command of a family leader or a wing commander that they trust and respect. When a congregation of Griffin riders fight as a unit, this aviation brigade is known as a Griffin Wing. Looks-wise, Wildhammer dwarves are characterized by many tattoos and feathered clothing. They're also taller, leaner, and wilder than their earthier Ironforge cousins. Wild dwarf is also a term used for the dwarves of the Wildhammer clan. The term wild dwarf is primarily used in the novel Day of the Dragon. Wild dwarves are the mountain dwarves, according to the Day of the Dragon, and are hill dwarves, according to Lands of Conflict. The term airy dwarf is also used to describe this race. The wild dwarf Falstad Wildhammer, or Dragon Reaver, has been described both as a mountain dwarf and is a member of the Wildhammer clan, thus a hill dwarf. The Khazmodan hill dwarves and airy wild dwarves are shown to have racial enmity to each other, although they call each other cousin. Phew, now that's the dwarf side of things done. Now let's hear about the second of the three major races in the area, trolls, and more specifically, forest trolls. The earliest inhabitants of the hinterlands were the forest trolls of the Amani Empire. Forest trolls are a green-skinned subspecies of trolls found in the forests of Lordaeron. Trolls are a diverse, sapient race that can be found in every part of Azeroth. They are one of the earliest known native races of Azeroth. Troll is a species where multiple subspecies exist. These subspecies vary from being tall, lanky, and muscular, with each subspecies being different than the others both physically and culturally. They have both elven and orc-like characteristics, with their fierce tusks and long ears. Their long arms, strong legs, quick reflexes, as well as their incredible agility and strength make them adept hunters. There are several subspecies of troll, all of which descend from the Zandalari trolls. Forest trolls are native to northern Lordaeron. In the time before the rise of the Night Elves, the trolls ruled the vast Amani Empire. Now, buckle up as we get through the history of the Amani. In a time of Azerothian antiquity, the Amani were one of the troll tribes that arose to challenge the Zandalari for territory and power. The Zandalari, or Zandalarian trolls, were the most powerful tribe to arise when the first trolls settled near the Zandalar Mountains. As the most superstitious tribe of trolls, they settled on the highest peaks of this mountain range, populated with Loa, the beings they revered as gods, where they built crude shrines that eventually became the massive temple city of Zuldazar. They united the other disparate tribes into a single mighty force which they called the Empire of Zul. There is no Dana, only Zul. Little Ghostbusters reference for you all there. Anyway, one day, a group of trolls awakened Kithix, one of the Black Empire's most ruthless and cunning Cathraxi generals. And just a reminder that the Dark Empire was the dark civilization established by the Old Gods after their arrival on primordial Azeroth, and that the Cathrax were monstrous faceless ones, aka Nraki, a monstrous race that arose from the organic matter that seeped from the Old Gods' blighted forms during the primordial era of Azeroth, with the Cathrax being warbringers far larger and more resilient than other lesser Nraki. The Cathrax viewed the troll nations with contempt and thus sought to destroy them with the Akir. At the onset of the Akir and Troll War, numerous smaller tribes fell before the Akir, who we've heard about when we chatted AQ all those episodes ago, who are an ancient sentient insectoid race who dwelt in ancient Kalimdor and who also arose from the organic matter seeping from the old gods' massive bulks. So, back to the Amani. Upon rudely awakening Kithix and war breaking out as a result, they were one of the many troll tribes to join the Empire of Zul, in which the Zandalari took on the role of commanding the troll armies. The Empire of Zul forced the Akir to retreat, and Kithix would be gravely wounded by the trolls and their lower allies. Seeking to permanently end the Akir threat, the Zandalari knew that no corner of the continent could be left unguarded, and so the Zandalari convinced the most power-hungry of the troll factions to spread out and establish new and permanent strongholds across Kalimdor. At the forefront of these groups were the Gurubashi, Amani, and Drakari tribes. After they had fully vanquished the Akir in their new regions, they could lay uncontested claim to the untouched fertile lands that they now lived in. The ambitious tribes listened to the Zandalari and readily agreed. The Amani tribe had set out to the northeast, their goal to hunt down and destroy Kithix, the Akir leader. They tracked the Cathrax's trail deep into the continent's northeastern woodlands, encountering increasingly fierce resistance the closer they came. After cutting through legions of Akir, the Amani finally reached the insectoid general itself. In a savage and legendary battle, virtually the entire tribe threw itself at Kithix and his remaining forces in a suicidal assault. The Cathrax, though wounded from the war's previous conflicts, personally slaughtered countless trolls. Only a minute fraction of the tribe survived the terrible engagement, yet Kithix eventually succumbed to its tireless hunters. Though it had cost the tribe dearly, the reputation of the Amani became legend among all the troll tribes for their heroic act. Atop the site where they had slain the Cathrax, the Amani established a new settlement. In the aftermath of Kalimdor's shattering, the forest trolls began to once again expand their lands across the newly formed Lordaeron, naming their new territory Zul'Aman, and from their temple city headquarters, the Amani Empire was born. A bit later on, it was rumored that exiles from the Amani Empire journeyed to the Well of Eternity, a lake of scintillating arcane energies formed from the very lifeblood of Azeroth's world soul, and within its waters were transformed into the very first Night Elves, though this has never been proven. But the Amani were not left to their own devices, and what they deemed to be their land was also being eyed off by other races. Some of those very elves which they had been rumoured to have been responsible for spawning eventually came to visit the region, as the High Elves wound up within Amani territories, and we'll get into the High Elves side of the story after we're done with the Forest Trolls. But in short, settling in the Tirisfal Glades, the High Elves quickly encountered the locals, and while contact with the human tribes was sparse, the local trolls attacked them on sight, quickly fueling a hateful feud between the two races, which commenced what came to be known as the Troll Wars. When the High Elves went to war with the Amani trolls, the elves could not understand how the trolls' weapon enchantments were more powerful than their own. The elves then stole ancient knowledge from troll spellcasters, including the famous Zanza, and used stolen idols to craft their own versions of the troll enchantments. Shortly after their settling, something evil beneath the earth started to drive some of the elves insane, so they decided to press on into troll territory. It didn't take long before the High Elves founded the kingdom of Kel'Thalas in the northern forests, and vowed to create a mighty empire which would dwarf that of their Kaldorei cousins, since they had been exiled from Kalimdor by the Night Elves, but not knowing it was an area sacred to the trolls. At the time of the founding of Kel'Thalas, the Amani Empire had rebuilt itself into the most powerful empire in the Eastern Kingdoms, and they still held much of northern Lordaeron in their territorial grasp. The Forest Trolls attacked the fledgling nation in ever-increasing numbers, forcing the elves to use their strong magic. The stubborn elves, unwilling to give up their new land, utilized the magics which they had gleaned from the Well of Eternity, and kept the savage trolls at bay. Under Darthramar Sunstrider's leadership, they were able to defeat the Amani warbands that outnumbered them 10-1. The superstitious troll warbands were frightened away, and it was 4,000 years before they truly retaliated. The vindictive trolls of Zul'Aman plotted and schemed in the depths of the forests and waited for the numbers of their warbands to grow. As time wore on after that initial victory, Kel'Thalas flourished into a shining beacon of the High Elves' efforts and magical prowess, and for nearly 4,000 years the High Elves lived peacefully within the secluded safety of their kingdom. As those thousands of years had passed, the recovering Amani warbands struck out of Zulaman determined to destroy the High Elves once and for all. They scored victory after victory against the Elves, pushing them slowly back. After years of continual besiegement by the Trolls, the High Elves, with defeat nearing, finally decided to seek the aid of the now powerful humans of Arathor. So, quick human tangent. Yes, the Troll Wars had other races involved as well, as the young human tribes of the area also suffered at the hands of the Trolls during this time. At the time, the humans were a factional people, scattered and leaderless. Chieftain Thoradin of the Arathi, one such barbaric human tribe located in the Arathi Highlands area, saw the threat to his race and decided to unite the humans. Along with his trusted friend and greatest general Igneus, later to be known as Trollbane, he devised a cunning strategy. Fight the nearby human tribes, and after each victory offer them peace and equality. With this tactic, he united the tribes and founded the first of the human kingdoms, Arathor. Situated in what is now known as the Hillsbrad Foothills and Arathi Highlands, his growing empire ruled from the capital city of Strom. Up to this time, the human empire had rarely had contact with the reclusive, magic-wielding elves, and all contact with the trolls was through border skirmishes. The Elven King, Anasterian Sunstrider, descendant of Darth Ramar, sent out their diplomats to try and negotiate the primitive humans into aiding them. Even though the elves had at times treated the humans no better than they had the trolls, Thoradin saw the danger in allowing the elf civilization to fall, and agreed to an alliance. The elves would teach 100 humans how to wield the arcane arts of magic, while the massive armies of Strom would mobilize and join the war against the trolls. During the war, Anasterian would wield Felo Malorn, a legendary blade, and kill many trolls with it. Troll witch doctors tried to hex the weapon, but they were met with no success. Igneus Trollbane led the humans into war with Troll Kalar in his hands, another legendary weapon, also known as Trollbane. The armies of Kel'Thalas and Arathor engaged the trolls in a great battle at the foot of the Alterac Mountains. The battle lasted for many days, but the Knights of Arathor refused to give any ground, and finally, the Elven Masters agreed that it was time to unleash the Elven and human mages upon the trolls. Magical fires from the sky hindered the trolls' regeneration, and their morale suffered. After some hours of the magical bombardment, the remaining human and elven warriors charged the trolls, broke their lines, and forced them into a terrible rout. Even as they fled, the trolls were pursued and butchered by the merciless allied forces. The trolls' power was broken and their population decimated as the last troll empire lay in ruins. The trolls would never recover from this defeat. The Gurubashi Empire had been shattered by a deadly civil war, and now the Amani Empire of the forest trolls was broken. What remained of the trolls of the northern lands was forced into the wilderness. However, the war was not completely unsuccessful for the trolls. Thousands of elves and humans had been slain, and the remainder were left completely weakened. Thoradin initially did not want his people to use magic, but he was forced to accept it so it could be utilized against the incredible troll armies arrayed against him. This led to the foundation of Dalaran, and later many other city-states. Following Thoradin's death, his empire was split up, thus removing any hope for a truly united humanity. The elves owed the humans a debt of gratitude for saving their people and ending the first major war since the Great Sundering and the War of the Ancients, and probably the longest in the history of Warcraft. This debt laid the groundwork for the Alliance and was honoured during the Second War when Anduin Lothar, last descendant of King Thoradin of Arathor, led the Alliance of Lordaeron to war against the Horde. The humans had the largest gains of the war. They were united, and they gained a debt of gratitude from the only force able to threaten them. They were initiated into the arts of magic, their technology was greatly improved and inspired by the elves. Some claim the elves taught them the art of metalsmithing as well, though it is more likely that they knew of that before the war. They also became the greatest power on the continent, and were able to spread in every direction with almost nothing in their way. So, back to the trolls. At the time of the First War, Orcish war chief Blackhand sent Orgrim Doomhammer to invite the forest trolls to join the horde. However, the trolls declined, having the still reasonably fresh memories of having their asses handed to them in the Troll Wars, and now held little interest in anything beyond their own forests. However, at the beginning of the Second War, Orc forces rescued the trolls' leader, Zul'jin, from Alliance soldiers, and in gratitude, Zul'jin pledged the forest trolls to the now war chief Doomhammer. Zul'jin had done what no other forest troll had done since the Troll Wars. He united the numerous tribes of Zul'Aman under one banner and joined the Horde. He hoped that by joining the Orcish invaders, they could attempt to retake Kel'Thalas from their sworn enemies, the Elves. Besides the Elves, the warriors of Stromgarde, the capital city of the since-established Kingdom of Stromgarde, located in the southwest of the Arathi Highlands, were also then considered traditional enemies of the forest trolls. The forest trolls contributed their axe-throwers, berserkers, and destroyer ships to the forces of the Horde, fighting with the orcs throughout the hinterlands and Kel'Thalas, slaughtered thousands of humans and elves, and razed to the ground all villages they found in their way. Orgrim Doomhammer and Zul'jin attacked the elf homeland and made it to Eversong Woods, until Alliance reinforcements could arrive. Doomhammer, however, focused his strength on Lordaeron and did not destroy Kel'Thalas as Zul'jin wanted. When defeat for the orcs seemed inevitable, the forest trolls as a united race abandoned the Horde as suddenly as they joined, but some tribes decided to stay with their orcish allies, notably by being brought to Draenor by Kilrog Deadeye, and then spread among the various clans of the Horde of Draenor, or joining up with Rend Blackhand's Dark Horde at Blackrock Spire. In the aftermath of the Second War, the forest trolls returned to the old ways of rivalry and fighting between the tribes. Two tribes, the Smolderthorn and Firetree, joined Rend Blackhand's Dark Horde and have taken up residence in Blackrock Mountain. During the Third War, the forest trolls stayed away from the main conflict. However, a fair percentage of forest trolls fell to the Lich King's powers. They have lost their will and are undead. The eventual fall of Kel'Thalas and Lordaeron, depicted in Warcraft 3, led to a unique opportunity to once again attempt to reclaim their ancestral lands. In the wake of the loss of the Sunwell, several tribes attacked the weakened elves. Zul'jin also returned, after years missing, to lead the trolls against the elves and, much to his frustration, his old allies, the Horde. The warlord was killed during the raid of adventurers seeking ancient treasures within the troll bastion Zul'Aman. The Amani forces were scattered for a long time until the Zandalari started to send their emissaries to every troll tribe, with Amani being no exception. An individual that dubbed himself the Invincible, Dakara, received the message and became the new warlord of the Amani. He quickly started to gather all remaining trolls of Zul'Aman in order to unite the tribe once more. By the time of the Wildhammer clan's arrival in the hinterlands, the trolls had recovered some of their numbers after the devastating war. These remnants split themselves into three separate tribes. The Vilebranch tribe was the strongest and held the ancient Amani bastions of Jintha Alor and the Altar of Zul. The Witherbark tribe was weaker than the Vilebranch, residing amongst the old temples of Shadra Alor and the ruins of Hiriwatha. The weakest of the three tribes was the Reventusk tribe. The Revan-Tusk trolls were nomadic and called no place their home. For many hundreds of years, this was the state of affairs for the trolls. In the hinterlands at the time of World of Warcraft, the Revan-Tusks are battling the other forest troll tribes in the region and the Wildhammer dwarves in an effort to claim the hinterlands for themselves and the Horde. The trolls view the Wildhammers as squatters on their ancestral lands and spare no opportunity to attack the Griffin Aeries. The Revan-Tusk trolls still feel some loyalty toward the Horde and have a pact of friendship and mutual assistance with the new Horde under Thrall, but declined to officially rejoin them as they also remembered the recklessness and corruption of the first Horde. Like other trolls, forest trolls practice voodoo magic as well as shamanism and priest magics. Arcane magic appears to be unpopular among forest trolls, and huntsman Makor said they dislike how other races abuse arcane magic. A small minority of forest trolls also worship Hakar the Soulflayer, though his cult never achieved the dominance it enjoyed among the jungle trolls. Forest trolls are vicious and cunning. As cannibals, they eat the flesh of their enemies and even sometimes each other. Forest trolls have few allies. They hate orcs who they see as weak and who failed on their promise to return the forest trolls to their former glory. Many tribes of forest trolls are also hostile towards each other. The Revan-Tusk tribe is the only tribe friendly towards the Horde. Relations between the Alliance and forest trolls is unknown as it has not been stated anywhere, but they no doubt hold a grudge towards the humans for helping the High Elves at the end of the conflict between the trolls and High Elves. Forest trolls and High Elves see each other as nothing less than sworn enemies. The High Elves had been in the dominant position for centuries since the Troll Wars. However, with the recent destruction of their homeland, the Elves are weakened and the Forest Trolls see a chance for revenge. Forest trolls are noted on average to be taller and more muscular than jungle and sand trolls, yet noticeably smaller than the Zandalari and ice trolls. Like other trolls, forest trolls have long, beak-like noses and pointed chins. They have tusks, typically coming from their lower lip. These tusks can vary between a foot long and barely visible. Forest trolls are fairly strong, but are also extremely agile. The third toe on their feet helps forest trolls to maintain balance and climb trees. Due to a mutation that took place many millennia ago, the forest trolls' bodies can support plant life to a limited extent, considered by some to be a strong affinity for plant life. A thin layer of moss inevitably grows on the skin of forest trolls shortly after they are born and gives them their characteristic green coloring. Their bodies could also support other simple forms of vegetation, such as algae. So, time for the final piece of the puzzle in the Hinterlands area. The High Elves. Who are they? Well, when the Night Elves adopted Druidism, they outlawed the practice of arcane magic. The use of its dangerous powers was punishable by death. However, many highborn loyalists of Queen Azshara, who we've heard about in episode 30 of the show, survived the Sundering, the cataclysmic event that tore Azeroth into multiple pieces, and these highborn were growing restless. They suffered from magical withdrawal, and 7,300 years before the invasion of the Horde through the Dark Portal, they spoke against Malfurion Stormrage and the Druids. Darthramar Sunstrider, the leader of this movement, declared the Druids cowards for refusing to wield the arcane. Malfurion and the Druids warned the Highborn that any use of magic would be punishable by death. Yet, in an attempt to protest the Druids' law, Darthramar and his followers unleashed a terrible magical storm upon Ashenvale. The Druids could not bring themselves to put so many of their kin to death, so they decided to exile the reckless Highborn from their lands. Sunstrider and his followers boarded a number of specially crafted ships and set sail upon the seas. By now, the Highborn were glad to be rid of their conservative cousins and free to practice the arcane with impunity. None knew what lay beyond the Maelstrom, but they eventually found the Eastern Kingdoms and formed their own magical realm. They abandoned the concepts of Elune and nocturnal activity, embracing the sun instead. They would soon become known as the High Elves. Sunstrider led the High Elven fleets across the world for many long years. Their goal was to find places of considerable ley power for them to build their new homeland upon. After landing on the Lordaeron continent, they moved inland and formed a settlement in the Tirisfal Glades. After a few years, however, many were driven insane. The belief at the time was that something evil slept beneath the glades, so the High Elves abandoned the region and moved northwards. They wandered the land for years. Around this time they had become completely severed from the life-giving energy of the Well of Eternity. This meant that they were vulnerable to the elements and had not received immortality from Nosdormu and the World Tree. They had shrunk in height and their skin had become a peach hue similar to most dwarves and humans. The High Elves soon discovered primitive humans, but associated little with them. The forest trolls of Zulaman under the Amani Empire posed the greater threat to their society, and we heard what happened there just now. After many more years, the High Elves discovered a land in the northern forests which suited them, and founded the kingdom of Kel'Thalas. Unfortunately, they would learn that Kel'Thalas was founded on a sacred and ancient troll city. The trolls began to attack the elven settlements en masse in retaliation. Although the Amani outnumbered them 10-1, the elves utilized magic to its fullest effect and defeated the trolls, yada yada yada. We heard a bit about that before. Some elves, wary of the Kaldorai's warnings, created a protective barrier around Kel'Thalas, which allowed them to continue their magic without attracting the Burning Legion's attention. To do this, they employed a series of monolithic runestones. Soon, Kel'Thalas became a shining monument to high elven prowess. It was crafted in the same style as the halls of Kalimdor, with the addition of integrated magic and a brighter colour scheme. Although they didn't worship it, a great respect was maintained for nature. The High Elves were careful to interweave their cities and architecture with their natural surroundings, creating a truly beautiful and tranquil land. To sate their hunger for great magical power, the High Elves created the Sunwell. It became the source of their power as the Well of Eternity had been in Kalimdor, although the Sunwell was much weaker, and the Elves were forewarned of the dangers. As the High Elves became more powerful, they cast an enchantment on the forest that bathed Kel'Thalas in eternal springtime, in defiance of the kingdom's location on the extreme northern part of the continent. From that point on, all High Elves had access to the Sunwell's powers from anywhere on Azeroth. Over time, the High Elves came to regard the Sunwell's waters as holy. Magic became part of their genes centuries before, but the Sunwell's unique energies became part of them acutely. For nearly 4,000 years, the High Elves remained relatively at peace. But while the Elves established their nation, the Amani plotted their next assault. 2,800 years before the First War, they unleashed it upon the High Elves. And then the humans got involved, etc., etc. Again, we heard about this before. 230 years before the First War, the Dwarven race split into 3 factions. The Wildhammers desired to open up trade with the High Elves, considered taboo at the time, and would serve as one of the catalysts for their war. When it ended, the clan became close allies to the High Elves. The two races were united through a mutual appreciation for nature and other cultural similarities. They would soon become each other's closest friends within the alliance. However, the same friendship mentioned in the RPG book is not mentioned in the Tides of Darkness novel. Therefore, this close relationship should be taken as non-canon. However, the Warcraft 2 manual directly states that the High Elves are formal allies with the Wildhammer dwarves, and in Blood of the Highborn, the High Elves made an unsuccessful attempt to evacuate many of their children to the safety of Wildhammer territory. Peace in Kel'Thalas continued for almost 3,000 years until the Second War. The Orcish horde came through a portal from the world of Draenor at the advent of the First War, and defeated the Kingdom of Stormwind. They then brought ogres into Azeroth, and allied with the goblins and forest trolls, turning their sights on the north. The High Elves only helped out on a small level in the First War. After the humans were defeated and fled north through Khazmodan, the dwarves sent emissaries to meet with the High Elves and humans to discuss the threat of the horde. When the humans proposed an alliance of their 7 nations, being the Wildhammer and Ironforged dwarves, the gnomes, and the High Elves, the elves were honour-bound to join it due to their ancestral connection with the Arathi, of whom Anduin Lothar was the last pure-blooded Scion. Under Anasterian Sunstrider, they were the least enthusiastic of the alliance and put forth only a token army. However, the Orcs' northern campaign, in which the Trolls were meant to take back their ancestral homes from the High Elves, managed to burn down the borderlands of Kel'Thalas, slaughtering many High Elves in the process and corrupting the runestone at Kaadaro. This enraged Silvermoon, which promptly pledged its full support to the war. The elves provided many archers, rangers, and destroyers to the conflict, and even craftsmen for the lumber mills of the alliance. The Horde eventually splintered under internal political pressure, and the alliance charged southwards to crush it. The Second War was won. In its aftermath, relations between the humans and the elves began to sour. The elves, who had been reluctant members of the alliance in the first place, retained little interest or investment in its affairs, such as upkeeping the internment camps and defending Nethergard. Despite this, Illyria Windrunner and her rangers accompanied the alliance expedition through the Dark Portal to avenge Kel'Thalas and keep it safe from future attacks. Following the war, some High Elves blamed the humans' poor leadership for the burning of their forests. King Terenas of Lordaeron reminded them that nothing of Kel'Thalas would have remained, if not for the hundreds of humans that gave their lives to defend it. But, nevertheless, the High Elves largely abandoned the alliance and retreated to their kingdom. Varisa Windrunner advocated continued support to the alliance after the Grim Batol incident, but Anasterian was not swayed. The Grim Batol incident being the story of the saving of dragon aspect Alexstrasza in the events told in the Warcraft novel The Day of the Dragon. It should be noted that although the High Elves retreated from the Alliance, a number of them remained in Dalaran and were loyal to the Alliance through the Kirin Tor. Prince Kael'thas Sunstrider was among them. Furthermore, despite the High Elves' official departure from the Alliance of Lordaeron, some elves still remained true to their former human and dwarven allies. The altruistic priests of Kel'Thalas refused to abandon their roles as healers and agreed to remain in Lordaeron despite the edicts from their reclusive masters in Silvermoon City. The High Elven priests used their light-given powers to heal the wounded and bolster the spirits of Lordaeron's fighting elite. These High Elven priests joined with Prince Arthas in investigating the plague with the goal of healing the land of its strange curse. Years later, the Scourge came forth. Its commander, Arthas Menethil, obliterated the leading nation of Lordaeron and then turned their sights on Kel'Thalas. Their goal was to revive a human man named Kel'Thuzad, who could summon the demon lord Archimonde into Azeroth. To do this, they required a source of considerable ley magic and chose the Sunwell. The High Elves had remained at peace since the Second War, with even their ever-present Amani enemies having grown less bold. Yet, while the Elves were safe within their enchanted kingdom from the woes befalling Lordaeron, they were also secluded and left unprepared for what was to come. Rumours of Arthas's patricide were beginning to spread, but the elves did not connect this to the plagued grain epidemic, and only shortly after did the undead Scourge arrive at Kel'Thalas. The High Elves faced the Scourge in battle regardless. This time, there would be no human army to rescue them. The High Elven army, led by the Ranger General Sylvanas Windrunner, made counterattacks every time the Scourge advanced. Despite their tactics and magic, the elves were pushed back from the outer to the inner elf gates. Finally, Arthas and his army, as well as new banshees including Sylvanas, advanced on Silvermoon and crushed the defenders. Anasterian himself was killed by the Scourge, along with his ruling council, High Priest Vandalor and Grand Magister Belovir. The Sunwell was used to resurrect Kel'Thuzad and fouled with evil in the process. Only about 10% of the entire race survived the genocide. Several defenders were raised into zombies, while some deceased magisters were raised into spectres and left at the defiled Sunwell. Some of them were lucky enough to be away from Kel'Thalas at the time, housed in Dalaran, or had travelled to Kalimdor with Jaina Proudmoore, but the majority of those who survived only did so by defending themselves or hiding. Soon, Dalaran, with the second greatest concentration of High Elves, was destroyed as well. Dalaran's defeat was swift and complete, and most of the High Elves there died under Archimonde's attacks. Other elves died afterward from bandits that came to sift through the wreckage. The surviving elves were somewhat scattered until Kael'thas Sunstrider, son of the deceased Anasterian, began to organize them by reclaiming every elf he could find and joining with Lor'themar Theron, who had done the same in Kel'Thalas. Under Kael's leadership, they took the name Blood Elves to remember the death of their king and brethren. About 90% of all surviving High Elves became Blood Elves. The Blood Elves fought to reclaim a small portion of Silvermoon, but most of the city and their land in general was haunted and overrun by lingering undead, while their buildings remained in ruins and vengeful Amani trolls began striking out again. Around 15% of the newly named Sindarai, led by Kael'thas himself, started travelling throughout the land in order to find more surviving elves, and to find a source of magic to replace the Sunwell. The elves were suffering from great withdrawals after being cut off the Sunwell because of its destruction. Due to the unreasonable orders of the Alliance leader, Garithos, Kael's people were forced to ally themselves with the Naga and fled to Outland. They soon joined Illidan there, and he in turn taught them how to sate their hunger for magic by feeding on alternative sources, having himself suffered the same withdrawal for thousands of years. Kael's Blood Elves began to hunt and use demons in order to steal their powers, although Kael's alliance with Illidan, and worse his new reliance on fell magic, was kept a secret from most of his brethren back home. Most of the remaining High Elves had chosen to remain with the Alliance following the Second War, and did not return to their kingdom following the Third. When Grand Magister Ramath returned to Kel'Thalas to teach them Kael's magic siphoning ways, some elves were disgusted by the practice, likening it to vampiric behavior, and opposed its use. Unable to lead a divided nation, Regent Lord Lor'themar exiled the dissenters from the kingdom, the exiles finding residence in Kel-Lithian. The Blood Elves who did not travel with Kael'thas to Outland remained behind in Kel'Thalas, and reclaimed much of their land from the Scourge. They eventually allied themselves with the Horde through their connections to the Banshee Queen Sylvanas Windrunner, now leader of the Forsaken. Although the Blood Elves harbour very little trust for the Horde, no one else was willing to fight for Kel'Thalas at all. Their relationship with their ancestor race, the Night Elves, is not flourishing, but they are not dire enemies either, as distance between their locations has meant less contact between each other, and fewer situations to arise that would cause fighting. A few High Elves have chosen to join the Alliance in recent years, but the Alliance as a whole remains somewhat suspicious of High Elves to this day. The High Elves' secession from the Alliance during the Second War left bitter memories. Furthermore, the Night Elves, who became part of the Alliance during the Third War, saw it as their duty to warn their new allies against the High Elves. The Highborn's part in bringing about the War of the Ancients figured heavily in the Night Elves' retelling of High Elf history. A small unit of High Elven Rangers under the command of Ranger Captain Falari Swiftarrow fought together with the zealous Scarlet Crusade against the undead for a while, though they were lost in battle. A large statue in honour of the capable elven leader was erected in the Scarlet Monastery. Deep within the hinterlands, the High Elves of the Kel Danil Lodge have their sights set on forming diplomatic alliances with other members of the Alliance. In World of Warcraft, the High Elves closely resemble Blood Elves appearance-wise. They in fact share the same model, although High Elves typically have light-coloured eyes that vary from light grey to blue to green, and occasionally brown and grey, as opposed to the green or gold eyes of Blood Elves. High Elf models also have less diverse diversity in skin and hair color, but their voices are more mild-mannered, like those of night elves. In the game, they use the same voices as night elves, although unsuitable Darnassian lines such as Elunadore or Ishnu Allah or Goddess watch over you are not used. Lore-wise, as High Elves and Blood Elves are the same race, and the latter holds the majority population, it is not uncommon for High Elves to be mistaken for Blood Elves. Taylor Everstride at Illyrian Stronghold even says, somewhat bemusedly, "No, don't feel bad. I get that a lot. I'm a High Elf, not a Blood Elf. Don't worry, I won't suck the magic out of you." However, other than greeting voices, both High and Blood Elves appear to share similar voice emotes in-game, particularly during combat. Before the Burning Crusade expansion, in-game High and Blood Elves simply used modified Night Elf models. Elves do have several characteristics in common. All three groups have unusually acute senses and are able to see clearly even in low light conditions. As a general rule, elves are also slim, athletic, and graceful. Furthermore, they all have large pointed ears that have been greeted with admiration or mockery by other races. One similarity between various elves only came about recently. Since the Night Elves sacrificed their immortality and much of their power at the end of the Third War, all elves are now mortal and have comparable lifespans that can extend as long as several thousand years. Surviving High Elves comprise a mere 1% of the original High Elven population, with the Blood Elves accounting for the remaining 9% of it. Since Kael'thas took 15% of the Blood Elves to Outland, that being 1.35% of the original High Elf population, and since Kael'thas's army numbered at least 2,000, it follows that the total High Elf population is currently at least 1,481. Apparently, and at least around 148,000 prior to the Third War. In relation to the playable races, Blizzard has stated that the High Elves have a considerably smaller population than even the Gnomeregan Exiles. High Elves are a rare sight even in Alliance lands, and are considered a fallen, all but extinct race. With the destruction of both Theramore and Kel-Lithian, along with the decanonization of the RPG sourcebooks, the bulk of the remaining High Elf population appears to be bound to the Kirin Tor's Silver Covenant, Outland's Illyrian Stronghold, when we get to Burning Crusade, and the Hinterland's Kel-Danil Lodge. Back to those population figures for a second. The non-canon role-playing sourcebooks gave solid population numbers for most races, and put the total High Elf population at around 24,810. This was contested, however, given the disproportionate amount of Blood Elves this would create, more than the entire Alliance and Horde combined, and further complicated by an errata which, among other tweaks, greatly reduced the total High Elf number. Ultimately, the RPG books as a whole were denounced as non-canonical, leaving only the Warcraft Encyclopedia's official percentages, the excerpts from the Journal of Archmage Vargoth, and Blizzard's own statements as an indication of canonical High Elf numbers. Like Blood Elves, High Elves can use arcane magic. Whether or not they are spellcasters, all High Elves suffer acute pangs of withdrawal in the absence of the Sunwell's energies. Some have realized the cause of their distress, others have not. A crucial difference between High Elves and Blood Elves is that no High Elves have decided to feed their hunger for arcane magic by draining that magic from alternative sources during the time when the Sunwell was useless. Without the Sunwell, a High Elf might still succumb to that addiction and become one of the Blood Elves. On several occasions after the Sunwell's defilement, Kael'thas publicly asserted that his people would die unless they found a new source of magic. Technically, the prince was mistaken. According to Azeroth's top priests and medics, the only High Elves to perish due to magical withdrawal have been the very old, the very young, and elves who are already in poor health. Such a low rate of attrition might be considered an argument in favor of simply foregoing magic and suffering through the consequences. Indeed, a few High Elves are said to have succeeded in taking this route through sheer willpower. They survived the process, however unpleasant. Apparently, certain magical artifacts also ameliorate the symptoms of withdrawal and might, if sufficiently powerful, be able to suppress them altogether. This is not to say, however, that withdrawal from magic would leave the High Elves unharmed. On the contrary, permanent mental or physical damage is possible. So, that's everyone who's in the hinterlands and how they got to be there. So Josh, you're saying, tell us about the damn area a little bit. Alright, well, it was only after the defeat of the Burning Legion in Kalimdor during Warcraft 3 that the hinterlands began to grow in importance once again. The Wildhammer dwarves at Airy Peak stood witness to the destruction around them. They watched helplessly as the humans and elves were destroyed by the Scourge and the crumbling of the alliance of Lordaeron. Though the Scourge has not yet reached the hinterlands, the dwarves remain on the edge of this frontier. After the Third War, the Wildhammers of the hinterlands remained independent of the Reformed Alliance, but softened their isolationist stance when Alliance adventurers aided them and proved their worth to them. Keldonil Lodge was used as a centre of communication for the High Elves of the hinterlands. Their ambassadors were working to establish relationships with other races, with whom they shared their knowledge of the Witherbark trolls that inhabit the area in the southern hinterlands. After the Third War, they struck an alliance with the Wildhammer dwarves, much to the ire of their common enemy, the Reventusk trolls. The hinterlands are also the location of Seradane, one of the 4 great trees leading to the Emerald Dream and guarded by the 4 Emerald Dragons. The 3 others are in Ashenvale, Duskwood and Feralas. The hinterlands are home to several characters of note. At Airy Peak, Falstad Wildhammer and Griffin Master Talanax seek aid in locating a young griffin. At Reventusk Village, Prima Tauntusk attempts to locate her missing mate, and Huntsman Markor sends bold adventurers into the deepest parts of the wilds in search of dangerous wildlife. The hinterlands is home to many wild creatures, such as dragon spawn, green dragons, griffins, moonkin, oozes, sharks, turtles, and wolves. So now it's time for yet another Countdown to Classic bus tour, everyone. We'll do a quick one this time, just going through the hinterlands. So get on board, come on, let's do this. You know the drill by now. Now, starting from Airy Peak, the Wildhammer clan's sprawling city that we've heard all about now, and driving west to east across the beautiful hinterlands, let's kick this tour off. On your right, you'll find Featherbeard's Hovel, a house that you'll visit for the Featherbeard's endorsement quest as Alliance. On your right as well, just further down the road, is Zun Watha, a forest troll ruin that was once inhabited by trolls of the Witherbark tribe in the hinterlands. The Witherbark tribe has apparently abandoned these ruins, which now lie empty. However, Zularek Hatefowler, a level 34 rare troll mob, can be seen occasionally visiting the ruins. Just past that is Bogan's Ledge, which is home to Witch Doctor Myjin and his pet spider, Chakaz. Witch Doctor Myjin was a leader of the Witherbark tribe. Ambassador Rualeth at Airy Peak wants adventurers to kill them as a gesture of goodwill. After Myjin and Chakaz's removal, the cave serves no purpose. Straight ahead, further down from there, is Hiriwatha, another Witherbark forest troll village located within the hinterlands and due south of the Keldonil Lodge. Down the road on your left is Keldonil Lodge, the base of operations for the High Elves in the area, as we heard before. Next door to that, we've got Shindigger's Camp, a small camp where the drunken dwarf Rhapsody Shindigger and the High Elf Gilvaradan Sunchaser are located. Back down to the main road and to the south of Hiriwatha is Shadra Alor. Built by the trolls of the Amani Empire, Shadra Alor is a temple to the spider goddess of the Witherbark tribe of forest trolls in the area. Shadra Alor is the Witherbark's primary settlement. Bran Bronzebeard once roamed the area killing rogue trolls for a time, but he needed a sizable force to cleanse the trolls from the area. After that venue, on your left is Agol Watha, a troll ruin in the north-central hinterlands that was overrun by animated sludges. It was once a temple of the later Mani Empire and later the Vile Branch trolls. Further down on your right is the Altar of Zul, a Vile Branch forest troll altar. Kiaga, the keeper, can be found on top of the altar. She's a high priestess of the spider loa Shadra. Mortagya, the keeper, can also be found here, and the sacred mallet used to create the mallet of Zul'Farrak dropped off Kiaga. Keep going down the road, and on your left is Skulk Rock, a forest troll ruin infested with slimes. A cave exists in this area, and it is one of the few places one can find ghost mushrooms. During the Second War, Skulk Rock housed an old Horde base, but it was abandoned when the Alliance of Lordaeron drove them out. Several cases of Hinterland's Honey Ripple were abandoned with the base. Further down to the northeast of Skulk Rock is Seradane that we mentioned earlier, an area in the northeastern part of the Hinterlands which houses one of the 4 entrances to the Emerald Dream, a large circular portal. Green dragons made this forest their home, including the drakes Rothos and Dream Tracker. The majority of the dragons that inhabited the area were green dragon spawn, which patrolled the area in 3-manned groups consisting of a Verdantine Oracle, accompanied by Verdantine Bowguards and Verdantine Tree Warders. Next to that, to the north still of the main road, are various Vile Branch ruins and temples, including Shalwatha, a Vile Branch forest troll ruin in the northeast. The Reventusk tribe and the Wildhammer clan are fighting for the territory. It seems the Wildhammer dwarves are gaining the upper hand, as they have taken over many of the former troll camps nearby. South of that is Jintha Alor. While there are no instance dungeons in the Hinterlands, the zone is notable for its huge outdoor micro-dungeon, Jintha Alor. Jintha Alor is the capital city of the Vile Branch tribe. It was built by the trolls of the Amani Empire, and it is the second largest city of the forest trolls, second only to Zulaman. The leaders of Jintha Alor are Vile Priestess Hex and Hitaya the Keeper. Rumours exist of an ancient egg of Hakar the Soulflayer residing in the city. It's named for the great Amani warrior Jintha. Jintha was an Amani warlord who was dubbed a fearless warrior who started the Troll Wars by invading Kel'Thalas, utilising the art of voodoo magic taught by the Zandalari and a host of lower allies to invigorate the Amani warriors with their presence. Jintha died in the famous magical firestorm conjured by the humans and high elves we discussed earlier. Past that is Reventusk village in the far southeastern corner of the zone, the only settlement of the Reventusk tribe of forest trolls that players can visit. You can find the port village on the coast of the Hinterlands. Horde players can get quests there which increase your reputation with the Reventusk troll faction. And that's it for the lore of this episode, everyone. I do apologize for the length. It was quite the doozy, but as I said, it was a very, very deep dive into the Hinterlands. I'll try and cut it down a little bit in the future, but no promises. As you know, we do like to go pretty deep here on the show. And that is the show for the day, everyone. I just want to shout out to some very dedicated patrons of Countdown to Classic. So, shout out to Billy C, a new Countdown to Classic patron. Thanks so much for coming on board, Billy C. Also, Fire Spittin' Kitten, thank you so much as well for becoming a Countdown to Classic patron this week. And as always, Flosy B, Palfurus, Rarebit, Ramani, Tsunami, The Anton, Wilson Ma, and Valaco. Thank you so much for your phenomenal support of the show. Countdown to Classic would not be the same without that support. And also, a big thank you to supporters Hurlbert, Tim B, Tim S, Minorou, Connor C, Michael H, John H.C, Damien A, Randall H, Myrtlebanks, and Zudamos. But for now, that's it from me for the day, everyone. So, signing off from Down Under, have a great rest of the week, everyone.